Good evening, everyone. This is the March 12th, 2019 East Brunswick Planning Board meeting. In accordance with the Open Public Meeting Law, on December 11th, 2018, notice of this meeting stating the time, date, and location was sent to the Home News Tribune. And on February 28th, the location of this meeting was changed and sent to the Home News Tribune, filed with the Township Clerk, and posted on the bulletin board in the lobby of the municipal building. A notice of this will be incorporated in the minutes of this meeting. The Chair reserves the right to call an application different from that appearing on the agenda. On each application, the Chair will give the public an opportunity to comment. The Planning Board will entertain no new business after 10:30 and will close all proceedings by 11 o'clock. The doors outside of the auditorium are to be used in case of fire or other emergencies. And those who are able, if you would please rise and join me in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Lauren, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Hoshman?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Reese?
Here.
Mr. Brockman?
Here.
Mr. Criscolo?
Here.
Councilman Scarpino?
Here.
Mr. Heppel?
Here.
Ms. Tidger? Here. Mayor Cohen? Chairman Taylor?
Here, and I would just remind the audience that Mayor Cohen is not here because he's been directed by the courts not to attend the hearings for this application. Not out of his not wanting to be here. First item on the agenda are the minutes of prior meetings. Once again, we adopt minutes by voice vote, which means I'll be the one asking you to raise your hands. Anyway, what is the board's pleasure with the minutes of the February 5th meeting, 2019, and they were in our packets?
Motion adopt.
There a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the minutes as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention. The minutes are accepted as submitted. Moving on. Minutes of February 6, 2019. What's the board's pleasure with the minutes? Somebody? There we go. Do we have a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approval of minutes as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Minutes are passed. Moving on, the next item of business is resolutions. Resolutions are items that the planning board has previously adopted, and we are voting on them tonight in their formal fashion. Mr. Sachs, is resolution 19-139 Edgeboro Road Renewal LLC in order for us to vote on this evening?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. What is the board's pleasure with this? Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Lauren, please call the roll of those eligible on this resolution.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Hoshman?
Yes.
Mr. Reese?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Criscolo?
Yes.
Councilman Scarpino?
Yes.
Mr. Heppel?
Yes.
Ms. Tidger? Yes. Chairman Taylor?
Yes, the resolution is adopted. Moving on now to old business. Application 18-35 VHD Summerhill. I believe you're here on that application?
Yes.
I'm not used to looking at it so far away to see.
Chairman Taylor, good evening, members of the board. David Himmelman for the applicant, HD Summerhill LLC. Mr. Chairman, just to give you a sense of the order for this evening
Okay.
and how we'd like to present, subject to your okay. the witness presentation. So as the board is aware, and I believe your staff also, the applicant did file a conceptual revised plan, which revised the existing site plan and modifies the plan in a variety of ways, reduces the total number of units from 120 to 96, also reorients many of the buildings on the site. The parking has been modified. There's been some additional parking provided for public access for Frost Woods, and several other what I would consider significant modifications. So, Mr. Chairman, what we'd like to do is first we'll be calling our civil engineer from Dynamic, Brett Scapinitz, who will give you an overview of the revised concept plan, with the understanding that this plan has still subject to detailed engineering. There have been meetings with Dynamic and CME and your professional staff at the township going over the current plan and also reviewing a lot of the engineering issues with regard to stormwater and traffic, et cetera. So, but we thought it was important to bring Mr. Scapinitz here tonight to go over the general revisions to that particular revised concept plan. Then, after Mr. Scapinitz testifies, we will bring our architect on, Jack Raker, who will testify on the architectural aspects of the project. We also have several architects from CBS and Chase, and then our planner will testify as well. So that's sort of the lineup, and if you would permit us to move forward, we will call Mr. Scapinitz again.
Sure, I think that's a logical way to proceed. And Mr. Scapinitz, I would just remind you that you're still under oath.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor. Brett, up. Mr. Sachs, we've got, go ahead.
Excuse me, I think last time when I spoke,
Yeah.
the board goes over there. You want to have that so the board can see?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, why don't we do it there?
We have to give him a microphone, or what do we do?
Can you help with that, Brett?
Oh, there's one there.
Mr. Sachs, I have small handout versions of what Mr. Scapinitz is going to refer to. I think this is A7.
That's fine.
So when Brett, when you're settled in, you would take the mark one. And Mr. Schmidt, could you pass those down next to someone?
Mr. Hellman, A7 is a colorized version of the site plan?
Of the revised site plan rendering.
Okay.
And that, the site plan rendering is dated today.
Thank you.
Just before you continue, Dave, I believe these proceedings are being recorded. The gentleman in the back, are you a member of the press, sir?
Yeah.
Can you identify yourself and tell me who you're with?
Daniel Israel for New Brunswick Today.
You're gonna have to just walk over to the mic. I want to make sure that members of the public and our professionals know that press is here and we're being recorded.
Hi, my name is Daniel Israel for New Brunswick Today.
Hi. Are there any members of the written press here? Can you just please walk over and identify yourself, tell us who you're with?
Hello, Vashti Harris with the East Brunswick Sentinel.
Thank you. Welcome. Scapinitz, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Evening.
Again, Brett Scapinitz with Dynamic Engineering Consultants. I have up on the board the revised site plan that was submitted as referenced by Mr. Himmelman. So we submitted 2 sheets. One was this plan and another sheet which contained updated site plan notes that reflects the different dimensioning, other bulk requirements as a result of this change. The plan was revised essentially as follows. As Mr. Hellman noted, there was a reduction from 120 units to 96 units, and that was primarily through the removal of one of the residential buildings. In the previous plan, there were 5. There are now 4 in that plan. With that change and the removal of that building, it allowed us to make some additional alterations to the site layout as follows. You can see that let me start actually from left to right. The 3 buildings that are oriented along the western side of the property remain generally in the same location, but we took the comments that were raised earlier by some of the staff in order to try to provide additional separation between the back of the building and the woods, the edge of that easement. We went from essentially about 5 feet to about 20 feet in this plan, so we provided additional room. I'm going to work in a counterclockwise way around the plan. If we go lower left-hand corner, the arrangement of the parking out in front of the residential buildings remains essentially unchanged. The configuration of the driveway at Old Stage Road, unchanged. Configuration of the CVS pharmacy, unchanged. But as we now start to head around the corner and up along Summer Hill Road, you'll notice that on the north side of the CVS pharmacy, we did make an alteration which adds additional green space on that edge of the CVS. In the previous plan, the drive aisle ran closer to the CVS and then swung in towards the opening at Summer Hill Road. So we gained additional green space in this plan by roughly 4%. We go from impervious coverage of 54% in the previous plan to 50%. That's a decrease of about 16,000 square feet of impervious surface. As we continue then around towards the Chase Bank, that bank arrangement is the same. As the board may recall, in the last meeting, we talked about we made a shift in the drive-through lane configuration in the back to bring it closer to the bank building. That allowed us in that last layout plan, if the board may recall, to provide a new drive aisle that remains in this plan that leads from the northernmost entrance off of Summer Hill Road along the north end of Chase up against the Frostwoods easement, and then turning into a slightly reconfigured parking area that is located to the east side and south side of, let's call it the 4th residential building. I talked about the first 3 at the very beginning. This 4th building, the one that remains of the 2 that were in that area, has also been rotated 90 degrees. If the board may recall, the building that was, one of them actually was rotated, they both were rotated 90 degrees, so their long side went east-west versus north-south here. We then moved the recreational area, patio area that was shown on the building, that was more towards the middle of the site, behind that building, as you can see. It's the grid pattern just to the east of that building. And again, just reconfigured the parking to wrap around and tie into the rest of the lot. So the real main changes take place in the center, to the north center of the plan. We also then, taking advantage of the reduction in, I guess, impervious, well, the removal of that building, we're actually able to free up some more room to gain a few more parking spaces. Our total parking in the associated with the residential, our total parking for the residential is 200 stalls, which provides a ratio of about 2.08 spaces per unit. That's above the 1.75 per the code for this site. But keep in mind also that includes 14 parking spaces that were designated. These are the 14 that I'm pointing to in the plan that face towards the back of the Chase building. Those 14 parking spaces, and again, we talked about this at the last meeting, are designated for parking for Frostwoods and will be signed as such to allow for parking there between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And there is one electric car charging stall located on just to the west of that row, where I'm pointing in the middle of the plan. Now, if we were to take out, just so the board knows, with those hours, we anticipate those 14 parking spaces to be mainly used by the residents. I mean, it's anticipated, obviously, that during the day, during work hours, obviously there's the ability for Frostwoods visitors to utilize those spots, but we don't feel it poses a detriment necessarily to the overall parking count for the residential properties, because we really want those for night when they're coming home from work. But if we were to exclude those out of the equation, we're still well over the 1.75 per unit that's required. With the reconfiguration of the parking, and one of the elements we talked about in the last couple meetings was ADA parking, and we provided a redistribution of that ADA parking to provide spaces that are very close to the front entrances of each one of the residential buildings. For example, the one in the southwest corner has one directly across. We have also space and a connection to an ADA space close to the front entrance of the one in the middle on the western end, and then ADA spaces close to the proximity of the buildings on the northern end. And also keep in mind that each one of these buildings also has an ADA accessible parking space that our architect can talk more to as part of one of the garages in each one of those buildings. So in total, we have 15 ADA parking spaces, where 13 are required for the overall site. The only other thing that I want to point out with the plan, and we will be working on this further with your professionals, particularly your traffic consultant, is that at Summerhill Road, there was some discussion, it was brought up as a comment, we talked internally about it, at each one of the driveways at Summerhill, there is signage that says do not block the intersection to help for freer flow of movements to vehicles turning left into each one of those driveways. And that's all I have with respect to the overall layout changes. Now keep in mind, we do recognize that this is just an overall site plan, and we're already working towards providing a more detailed site plan set to provide to your professionals. In fact, last week I had a discussion in a short meeting with your professionals at CME to go through the changes and try to get in sync with what needs to be done with respect to the resubmission of those plans, which has to happen essentially by the end of this week in order to make the next meeting, and we're prepared to do so they'll have time to be able to make their comments for the next hearing. Thank you.
Any board questions for this witness?
Yes, sir. The Frostwoods parking, Frostwoods is open from dawn to dusk, so I'd like to see that signage changed to reflect that. That's when the park is open. Check with Mr. Kipp, is that the case? So he has confirmed that. Also along Old Stage Road, I believe I brought up, I may be wrong, that I'd like to continue that bike path that's coming down Summerhill and have it go all the way down Old Stage Road. As you know, Mr. Taylor, the mayor has a bike path initiative that we're working on in the town, and every application that comes in, we look to expand our bike paths. I still don't see a playground here. I was hoping that there would be a playground for the children that potentially are going to live here, because there will be affordable housing units, at least somewhere over where the patio area was, so children would have a safe place to play. That's just a comment. The handicap accessible parking spaces that you're counting that are in your garages, question on that. So you're only going to rent those spaces to people that have handicap placards? If so, if the answer is no, then you don't meet the requirement. So I would say it's honorable for you to make a couple of those that are handicap accessible, but they don't help your count. Plus you're charging people additional money for those handicap spots, which also I believe you can't do. It's been a while since I studied the federal laws, but I don't believe you have enough handicap spots if you're counting all those garage spots and those driveways as handicap spots, and your intention is to lease them to people that don't have placards.
Well, we didn't make, I know, maybe I didn't make myself clear, I'm sorry, but we didn't count the 15 parking spaces, and you can count them on the plan. There are 15 that are ground stalled, they're not counting the garage spaces. So excluding the garage spaces, we have 15 ADA spaces painted on the plan, and 13 are required.
I would still say, Mr. Chairman, that they're not distributed enough for the residential areas to allow people that are handicapped to access the buildings. I see them certainly over near CVS. There's several there, and there's 2 at the bank, so there's 6 of them.
Joe, I have a similar concern, because if you live in that building in the upper northwest corner, and you live on the southernmost portion of that building,
Correct.
and I would assume, it's still a pretty long walk. It's better, but certainly, when you envision, when you think about the intent of the ADA law, which is so well conceived, you thought of a spot right up front, right close to the building. So I agree, the commercial section of the application looks like the handicap spots are right where they should be. But the residential end, it still seems to be, they still seem to be not well placed to me. And it's an additional concern for me, since we may have some moderate income folks who are also disabled living there. And so I really see it as a problem.
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask Mr. Himmelman a question. Since I know you have not submitted your final version of this plan, perhaps you can revisit that issue with the final submission that you're going to take.
Absolutely.
It seems to me like that's something that could be resolved.
I think so, and I understand, Chairman Taylor, your point, and I think we can try and redistribute the handicap parking and throughout the site, but also keep in mind not to have conflicts with the garages.
Right.
So I think Mr. Scaffens could probably look at that and come up with a reasonable alternative plan as to the location of the handicap spaces, but I understand your point.
And just one other comment. Joe, I bring this up only because usually, mediocre minds think alike, and you and I had the same comment. I look at this and I see, buildings that are going to have kids and a fair amount of children, and it might just be, I don't remember exactly what's going on that patio. Have we discussed that? What specifically, what kind of recreation?
I think our architect can answer that question.
Okay, because, I just don't see anywhere for children to, to safely play, and that's a concern for me also. Any other, yes, Mr. Phillips?
Clarification on the handicap spots, if I could. You have 4 of them designated as being in front of the building, so those are 4 parking spaces for handicap. Is also included in your total, the 4 that would be inside each of those garages?
Well, we have, those are available, but they're not in the total count to meet the ADA for the there's 15 painted stalls on the asphalt outside the buildings. That total is above what's required for the overall site, but agreed, and I know we've gone back and forth on this a few times, we'll look at it again and try to further redistribute the parking spaces and work with your professionals to do so.
Because obviously, you've got a handicap on the front, you would assume the first one is going to be occupying the inside, it's also going to be the handicap outside.
If they're taking one of the units that has the indoor space, then they would have 2 stalls, so you're correct, they would have the space behind it.
And then if I could just ask one other question.
Sure.
Specifically about, on this report that you gave us, that I guess you signed, it says 7 designated crosswood parking spaces for DEM5, independent of Brunswick established before. But yet you are showing 14,
Yeah, I'm not sure the date of the letter that you're reading.
February 15th.
I think that's the old, the previous letter, that's not the letter related to that plan. But this letter, this plan is dated February 28th. So that was probably for the previous revision.
That supersedes. And I guess you might not be the person to ask, but you're indicating that those are the spots there by which people would then access Crosswood?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and you've got like a little walkway maybe on the northernmost section, maybe 30 feet or 20 feet, isolated out?
Yeah, if you look behind you, we've provided, so this is the row of 14. There's a walkway or a sidewalk right in front of them so that people could walk. Then there's a crosswalk to get across the drive aisle and then lead into the woods.
Okay, and to your knowledge, do you know where the trail hits?
Yeah, actually the trail hits the end of the trail is just to the west. Not far, it's roughly 30, 40 feet. What we're fighting against there is also grades and the change in elevation in that location. And we have a retaining wall that needs to extend to about that edge point. So we brought the pathway as close as we could to where the current path ends.
Are you aware of the major entrance that's located in the northwest corner that has information about the park to go in?
That's on the other end of the park.
It's in the existing parking lot right now, in the northwest corner. There is a wide open area there. That also appears to be a much more obvious entrance than what you're alluding to here.
Okay.
So I question that. The other, you may not be able to answer it. There's a large number of trees that have a red spot on them, also right by the area here, which you're talking about at the entrance to the park, although there's not really a clear path right there.
Okay.
Is there some intention to take down any of those trees? What would the reason for the red mark?
There could be a couple different reasons, to be honest, because we had a tree expert go out there and help us locate trees in certain areas. So as part of this process, and this was touched on a bit earlier on, so I'll repeat it. With the easement, the 150 feet along the west end and the 50 foot to the north, we basically went out with our surveyors and the tree expert and tried to locate what trees were near that boundary, because we wanted to make sure, as we were doing our work, we wanted to be clear what trees would be impacted, not only by for the clearing up close to the easement, but even ones that are just beyond the easement line into Frostwoods, because obviously trees can still be impacted with their root systems.
Well, when I was out there is in fact stakes in the ground and some green markers which indicate where that line is. These trees are between that and the area that's already open to the parking lot.
Okay.
And it does seem that there's only some isolated ones, it wasn't on every tree.
Okay.
So I don't know what that was. Do you know what that was?
Yeah, Mr. Phil, my understanding is some of those trees were marked, well before we even started this application process. I don't know if the town did that, or I'm not sure, but I noticed the same thing when I was out there a while ago. I'm not sure why they were marked.
So you'll check and see if the spot that I'm talking about, which looks like it's a pretty wide open trail entrance, if you guys are going to plan to try to do something to keep that from being closed off.
We're going to be closing that off in that northwest corner.
You're going to be closing off that part of the trail.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what the town has done as far as that end of the trail is concerned, but it would be important for them to know that you're going to be blocking off a use area.
Okay.
And the other question is, there's a shrine or something right there with the name Wade. Do you know anything about that? Mr. Hamlin, do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know what that is.
You've been in town a long time. I believe that that's the place where one of the junior high school students died.
Oh,
And now I made sure to give you the memory, right? Okay. Are you planning on just eliminating all that too?
well, let me get back to your question about the current access back there to the park. I'm not not sure that I don't know if that's a quote-unquote public access right now. It doesn't appear that that's the case. Maybe professionals could respond to that, but I don't know that it currently is. I don't believe it's a public access, which is why I think we were proposing to modify where the access to the park would be.
I would only ask if you could, Mr. Hellman, to work with staff and the town to verify where those normally approved entrances were and whether or not you're looking to close off one of them.
Okay.
And then as far as Mr. Wade is concerned, I don't know what you plan to do with that. Maybe you inherited something that's unfortunate, but I don't know if you want to be the one who's going to make it go away.
Understood.
I would just remind my fellow board members that if you speak, make sure the blue button is on and get a little closer to the mic. Okay, any further board questions for Mr. Kaplowitz at this time? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Any staff questions? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I do have a quick question. Thank you. This is in reference to our memo dated March 7th, 2019. I have a quick question regarding the usable open space. It's raised on page 4 of our memo. Just a quick clarification. The permitted requirement is 35% of the site should be designated for usable open space. Per the current concept, it's shown to be 50%. In terms of calculation, I just wanted to understand if the existing buffer areas, the 150 and the 50-foot buffer, has been included in this calculation or no?
Yes, it has been.
All right. And in terms of what we kind of categorize usable open space as areas that are landscaped with courtyards, walkways, and sitting areas, would that be provided in final landscape landscape plans for this area?
Yeah, there will be more detail regarding that in the plan, yes.
All right, thank you. Because the question was, the second point of it is, I guess the intent of this area is to create a sense of place that would be, have kind of pedestrian plazas, walkways, or as one of the board members pointed out, maybe a playground area. So considering we have increased the amount of impervious space, would that be something to be considered in the plan, as to creating a playground, active playground area or something?
I can't speak to the playground, I defer to my client on that, but with respect to the green space, we certainly have more green areas that we are going to be able to landscape more and add more features in those areas, and we'll certainly be doing so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, no further questions. We will, I'd like to bring up our architect for the project, Jack Raker. Will have to have him sworn in and qualified. Jack, you gave your thumb drive, right, into the...
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, our next witness is Jack Raker, who's our, as I indicated, the project architect, and we would have to have Mr. Raker sworn in and qualified.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last name, and give us a bit of your CV, please.
My name is Jack Raker with Minnow and Wasco Architects and Planners. First, I'd like to say I'm a graduate of East Brunswick High School, class of '85. Go Bears.
Very good.
I graduated with a bachelor's degree from the New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm a practicing architect. I've been practicing in the world of mixed use and residential architecture for the past 22 years.
Have you ever testified here?
Testified. I've done some presentations, but as a helper, but I've never actually, this is my first time back in my hometown.
And you've testified before?
Before many boards in New Jersey, Jersey City, Hoboken.
We're happy to accept you as an expert, and welcome home.
Thank you.
Now, did you go to Churchill or Haverhill?
I went to Churchill School.
Me too.
Went to Central School for my elementary school, and then over to Churchill.
Good, well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, just before we begin your testimony, did you bring any exhibits with you this evening?
I did. I brought a PowerPoint presentation, and then I brought copies, about 10 copies, I hope that some of you might have to share, of the presentation itself.
In fact, I have these small versions of the PowerPoint.
Yep.
And that'll be
8-8.
Why don't we see if we can share, two people could share one.
Director, would you, while the handouts are being passed around, if you would go through your PowerPoint presentation, providing an overview of the project, including the building, the amenities, the elevations, the floor plan, and what's proposed, and then we can get into other questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to give a quick overview. I know that the board engineer, the engineer actually gave some overview on the plan, but I'm going to summarize some of the details of the unit counts and whatnot. We have 4 buildings, 3 of which contain 25 dwelling units. The one up on the screen now contains 21 dwelling units. There's just one of those buildings. And that is the building that has some amenities, additional amenities at the ground floor. There's a total of 96 dwelling units, 72 market rate units, and we've maintained the 24 low and moderate units as in the previous plan. We've only decreased the market rate units. The market rate units consist of 37 one-bedrooms, 35 two-bedrooms, and the low and moderates are 4 one-bedrooms, 15 two-bedrooms, and 5 three-bedroom units. Okay, so the building that I have up on the screen here is a 21 dwelling unit building. It's the building that was reoriented in the most current plan. The bottom half of the building here, right here, is the side that faces the parking. And you can see that there are the driveway spaces shown in the plan here and here. There are 10 garage spaces in this building. And I've identified in the most recent set of plans the accessible garage parking space that is available for any of the tenants. The lobby is centrally located here in the building, and it's accessed right here off that green space that's out in front of the building. Through doors is a small vestibule. You go in, and there'll be mail boxes inside that lobby. You'll get your mail. You can then go into an elevator and take that elevator up to an upper level floor and access your unit directly. If you rented a parking space or a garage, you pull up, hit your button, the garage door would open, and you could pull into your garage space. Inside each of the garages is a doorway that leads out to a hallway. That hallway then goes out, and you can access the elevator as well. So all of that is done internally. If you have groceries, you're not outside. You can go into your garage, go out, and access it entirely within the building without getting in the weather if you choose to rent a garage. There are some storage spaces located at the ground floor for additional storage. These apartments aren't, some people will be downsizing and will have some things they want to store. There are additional storage spaces located at the ground floor of each building, and they're shown in this orange color here. The amount in this building is approximately 14 storage closets. That total number hasn't been fully vetted out yet. Some we might want to make a little larger, and some we want to make a little smaller, and vary that number a little bit. You can see on the ground floor here, there's a large trash room. That trash room stacks with some levels above. So if you're in your unit and you would like to throw out your trash, I'm going to go to an upper level plan here. Just a simple, you walk out a doorway of your apartment, walk down the corridor to a trash room. You go into that trash room, open up a small door, and you can throw your trash right down that chute. That chute then goes right down into this trash room located on the ground floor. Building management handles the trash after that. They'll empty that trash room, take it out on trash day, and if you're a tenant, you don't ever have to leave your building to take your trash So this building has a few smaller, slightly smaller unit count than the other three. This one has 21 dwelling units, where the other three have 25. And that's because at the ground floor, we've located a leasing area, and that's accessed right off the main drive as you come in. And that leasing area, they'll be manned most of the time, the hours I think the owner testified to in his opening comments. You can go in, you'll be shown the apartments. They usually walk you through this leasing area, take you out, walk you through the amenity area and up into some of the units to show you a sample unit. I'm going to show you some pictures as we move forward. These pictures are not of what we're doing exactly in this project. We haven't fully designed that amenity space yet, but we have done many of these buildings throughout the state of New Jersey, and we have many amenity spaces that we've done. We haven't fully programmed it out, but I'm going to show you some very typical amenity spaces. So this is a lobby in one of our other buildings. This is actually one up in Morris Plains. And this is a small lobby. As you walk through the doors, there's a small seating area. And what you can see through here, the point of this is that I wanted to show you that through here you can see this little TV screen and a little hidden area. And what that shows is what we call package concierge. And what happens is tenants will get an email that a lot of people shop online. They get an email saying that they received a package and that they need to pick it up. They go into that space and they walk in. The TV screen usually shows them where their location of the package is. They can go in, punch in a code, and they can receive their package. For packages that are oversized, usually in the leasing center, there's a closet there that'll handle any oversized packages. And that's how we handle most of the deliveries that happen to these buildings. A lot of people shop online, so we do need to manage it. This is a typical amenity space in these buildings. There's usually a fireplace, seating areas, places for people to socialize, also games. Sometimes there's foosball, there's pool tables. They have usually lots of glass, large glass, nice light fixtures. Great places for many people to socialize in these places. And really, a lot of people, this is almost like your big living space, your social gathering space, where you can go and meet a lot of your neighbors, or have a small party, or gatherings, Super Bowl party, potentially. There's usually a lot of TVs in and around these spaces. Here's another view. You can see the foosball table, some banquette seating, foosball table, another fireplace. There's a TV on this particular building. There's a TV on the other side of that fireplace wall. Definitely fitness. People love their fitness centers. They're well appointed. There are many treadmills and free weights. And some of the larger ones, I don't think we'll be able to fit one here. There's what we call a flex space that can be rented out by a yoga instructor or Pilates or any other recreation that you can think of for fitness. I don't know that we'll get one here, maybe a small one, but they sometimes do theater rooms in some of these amenity spaces. And then another big amenity is co-work space. A lot of people who live in these apartments don't commute every day. They'll commute 3 days a week, and they'll want a place to work a couple other days. A lot of millennials are not going into the office every day. So we provide small office space. We'll provide small cubbies or co-working space, a place where you can make a private phone call. This space is usually right in that amenity space, so that you can go there, you can work. Maybe neighbors down there are working. It feels more like an office, but you're not going into the office. Another thing that's actually becoming more and more popular is a pet wash room. These places are very pet friendly, and they like to cater to those who love their pets. And sometimes it's a little inconvenient to wash your dog in a tub or whatever, so they create a pet wash station. We haven't identified a location yet, but they are very popular, and I suspect once we do the market studies, this will be on the list. And it's just a place where you can go, wash your pets. Sometimes there's actually a little hair dryer there. You can put that up and dry them off. So before there was a question about that amenity terrace, and again, it's not fully designed yet, but this is a very typical amenity terrace layout. And I'll walk you through it. It's a plan view of the building we were just looking at. And this is the amenity space here. The main entry drive, I believe, is over on this side. And then Frost Woods is over here. And the bank is up top. So your amenity space then usually gets lots of glass out to this terrace space. And what I'm showing here is some trellis up above, some seating, fireplace or fire pit. Usually these are all gas. They're not wood fires. People aren't throwing logs into these fires. It's all gas and it's controlled by the leasing. We do like to put games out here as well. Sometimes it's shuffleboard. That's actually coming back. We're seeing that a lot. But this one is, we showed chess or checkers. You put the large chess or checkers pieces out on the terrace and just create a different pattern in the terrace, the amenity terrace, and people will play. There's lots of seating out here, and that seating is right around a large grilling area. People love to grill. They can't grill out on their terraces, and they can't grill in their apartments. So they will grill out here, get together with some other tenants, and there'll be like a bar, a back wall, maybe there'll be some TVs on that back wall, and that'll be covered in a trellis. I have some theme images for that as well. So here's a fire pit area that we've done. This is a gas fire pit table where you can see some grilling stations in the back. Here's grilling stations with some canopy structure for shade. Now, I did want to talk a little bit before I get all the way through the buildings. I know I talked about some of the things that we put in these buildings, such as the trash rooms, the elevator. And this is not your typical garden apartment. Some of you are familiar with, I guess, Cranberry Crossing is a garden apartment style that you're probably familiar with. And that's where you have the open stairwells and you walk up the open stairwells to your unit. That's not what we have here. There's a lot of amenity built in, such as the garages, the elevator, and the trash. And those do not happen in some of those garden apartments. So with that, we like to provide a certain amount of units to allow that amenity to happen. Typically, a building like this that I plan all over the state, actually in Pennsylvania, they range from 32 to 54 dwelling units each. That's a fairly standard size. And you want that when you're providing 2 stairwells, hallway, elevator, trash rooms, additional amenity, lobby, mail rooms. You want to make sure that there's enough units there to service that amenity. When you're building a garden apartment, you're not worried about that. There is no amenity. There's just a stair, a door to your apartment. So you can decrease the amount of units. When you want a building that you need to substantially provide all that amenity, you want enough units to allow for that. Another thing that to talk about the number of dwelling units in the building, we've provided 25 in 3 of the buildings and 21 in another, which is a total of 96. If we were to do that in a 20 dwelling unit building, we'd have to add an additional building. And I know that already there's been comments about this site being a little, at least the previous site plan with the additional building being somewhat too dense. And we feel that this having those additional units, those few additional units in a building, allow us to free up some space on the ground and provide these amenities. What I'm showing here is essentially a front elevation. This is the elevation you would see as you drive up to the building. So as you drive up, you'll see there's individual garages. There's an exit stair door here, and this is the main entry. to the building. There's green space around that main entry. And what I'd like to point out is that we've varied the mass and materials and changed a lot of the colors to break up the mass of the building. You're not seeing this building with one straight roof line and one material that's common all the way across. We've changed materials, vertically broken the building, changed cornice lines. The cornice jumps up and down. It allows the building to be broken up. We've also changed, with that, we've changed door colors in the garages. So you're not looking down a long wall of one monochromatic color of white garage after white garage after white garage. We've also recessed some of the garages as well, so that some of the garages are in a little bit deeper shadow than other garages. And the building height complies with the ordinance. It's 34 feet 6 inches. This would be an end elevation. There is an access door on the side where trash would come out, where the maintenance would come, grab the trash. There's also on each side, on one side of the building, a move-in area, so that move-ins could happen freely outside of the lobby. And this is essentially, it doesn't look like I changed the slide. It's a mirror version because the one side of the building looks identical to the other. This elevation shows the amenity space right here. We put a little bit more glass fronting out on that patio that we designed, so when you're in the amenity space, you can look out and see that nice terrace with all the fireplace that's outside and the grilling station. I'm going to walk quickly through these plans because this is very similar to the previous building. It just has additional dwelling units at the back where there initially was, in the first slide, amenity space. We've identified in these plans the low and moderate. They're labeled as COA units. You can see them here and here. And I'm going to go quickly through these slides. The buildings are essentially identical except for the amenity space. All of the materials are high quality materials, fiber cement siding, brick, well appointed, metal sunshades, metal railings. Talk quickly about the units. These are all open floor plans. Every unit in this project is fully adaptable and accessible. Since these are elevator-served buildings, they're not like garden apartments where the ground floor is the only one that's accessible. Every unit in this project is fully accessible.
Jack, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
On that particular slide, you have 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. The 3-bedroom, I know we're also providing. How is the floor plan different than the 2 bedrooms? Other than the number of bedrooms, obviously. What other aspect?
The only other aspect is there's one less bathroom. There's 3 bedrooms, 1 less bathroom. So it would be a 3-bed, 1-bath.
And what would be the approximate square footage of the 3-bedroom?
The 3-bedroom would be very similar, maybe slightly smaller. If there's any mechanical chases that we need, we could utilize that location.
Okay, thank you.
Just have a couple pictures of some typical units. They get well appointed. They're stainless appliances throughout, granite or hard surface countertops. It's an open floor plan and engineered wood flooring. So these units are very well appointed. People are, paying attention to those design shows, HGTV. I know I'm glued to it most of the time. And they know what they're looking for when they look for these apartments. And that concludes my presentation. Is there anything I missed?
No, maybe I think you did a fine job. Is there anything else you want to add or develop on?
No, I think, if there's any questions from the board.
Mr. Chairman, any questions from board members?
Are there board questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mr. Happel?
Looking at the picture, with, back to the terrace, with the grills and furniture, which is beautiful. Like you said, that this is just an example.
Sure.
And one of the things that I would like to see, and probably going to do it anyway, but I'd like to hear that's your intention, is that there are walls here that appear to be on, I believe would be on all three sides. And I'd like to know how high those walls will be. And I don't see a gate. Again, I realize this picture isn't that easy work, but I don't see a gate there. And, it's right next to all those parking spaces. And I think of the young children out there with their parents, so I like to ensure that they're going to be protected. It doesn't take very long for a child to, run 10, 20 feet. So what are the thoughts on what your intentions are?
Again, I haven't fully coordinated this design with the civil engineer, and we do work together to formulate the proximity of adjoining spaces, and we're working with him right now to essentially design these edges. Conceptually, right now, what I'm showing in my plan is just landscaping, and there is some wall. I'm showing a wall potentially over here, but I'll work with the civil engineer to provide protection. Landscaping is a good protection, especially when it's dense. And then we also do some small walls and railings as well.
Yeah, and again, the picture it's on marked, so I can't say what it is, but the one with the grills and everything, that's what I'm envisioning. And something like that, high enough and with gates, something
We typically don't
necessary.
I don't think we typically gate them, but, we like all the residents to be able to use them, but we can talk about that.
I hope so. Thank you very much.
So hold on, Mr. Phillips. Anybody else? Mr. Criscolo? I'll get to you, Steve. Okay. You tend to be lengthy, so I want to give some of the other members a chance.
The garbage, so you're going to dispose of the garbage? You're not going to rely upon the township, which provides garbage pickup?
No, it's all private haulers.
It's all private haulers, so I just want to make sure they're not going to come back at a later date and request the township to deal with that. How are you going to be handling recycling?
Recycling is done, and there's a couple different ways that we've done it. We placed a trash chute that can handle the recycling to go down to the lower level. I believe in this building, we'll have in that small trash room at each level. Let me go back to that floor plan. So in the trash room at each level, next to the chute, we could put a couple of recycling containers, and then those will be emptied by maintenance and brought down manually.
As you alluded to, there's a lot of Amazon deliveries and whatnot. I've seen other sites that have tried to do this, and the boxes just, the tenants don't break down the boxes and it just builds up. So I don't think that room is big enough to handle your recycling needs. So just a comment.
I can say that typically that room, we size them accordingly. We haven't had any problems. Nick can testify to as far as maintenance and how often it's emptied. It may get emptied twice a day. You may have maintenance go there in the morning and then go there at the end of the day.
Okay, that's all I have, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question before you get to Steve.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Brown, Ken,
Similar with the maintenance, is there a separate maintenance work area or a maintenance shed area? I know you identified the leasing area in that one building, but I don't see anywhere on the plans, and I believe the applicant provided testimony that they're going to have on-site maintenance. Where will these people be working out of? Where will they be staging equipment? Where will they be, as you indicated, if they're breaking stuff down? They're going to need machinery, they're going to need equipment, they're going to need tools. Yet I don't see anywhere on here that you've identified either a maintenance work area, maintenance shed, staging area.
There is not a maintenance area that has been identified yet. Some projects don't actually get, while there's maintenance on site all day because it's provided by a service, there's no actual office or maintenance office that is provided at that location. So the maintenance people are there daily, they're there on site, taking care of whatever needs to get taken care of, but there's no actual office on site. So I'll work with the client to, if he chooses to have a small maintenance room, there's plenty of space in this amenity area to provide a small office for maintenance.
Yeah, but not at the expense of the dog walk.
I can tell you that you'll have a lot of angry tenants if that's the case.
And I
I'll
believe,
come back to that.
and I believe you also talked about the fire pit and grilling station areas are controlled by leasing.
Correct.
Leasing, I'm guessing, is only there certain hours, Monday through Friday, maybe Saturday and Sundays up to a certain time. Does that mean after leasing leaves, there's no facility?
You know, I'd like to defer to my client to answer that question. He may have a better understanding operationally how maintenance shuts down certain amenities at certain times.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Manoy, who's previously sworn on behalf of the applicant, address that question if you'd like.
Sure, I would, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So generally what happens is after hours, these facilities are available to the tenants and on a we'll call kind of basis, whatever their demands are. And then the following morning, whatever happens the night before, is just cleaned up by our maintenance staff.
That would include the fire pit, because if someone wants to use it at 8 or 9 at night over the summer, they'll have access to it?
Yeah, and oftentimes we set them up with a timer actually, where they're on for certain hours. So they may kick on at 5 o'clock and off at 10 or 11 o'clock. They're programmed that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Larry? Mr. Seth?
Yeah. There was a comment that was directed to the engineer about a tot lot or a playground area. I'm assuming, and again, I'll address it to either Mr. Hillman or to your architect, I'm assuming that you can, on your final plans, design some type of amenity for children. And don't, Frost Woods is not an amenity for children.
Right.
So.
I've been discussing that with Lenoya, and I think we're prepared to work with your staff on recommending a portion, an area on the site that would be appropriate for that kind of playground, top lot, et cetera. So I would like to present that to your staff and hopefully get them to weigh in on that.
Okay, just that.
And, Mr. Sachs kind of read my mind, because one of my major concerns about this application is the lack of things to do for the children who are going to live there. I'm glad to hear that you're going to work with staff to do a playground, because I think it's desperately needed. The other thing is, I've been on this, chair of this planning board for about 20 years, I think. And yeah, I look at these beautiful renderings, and I can tell you went to East Brunswick because they're really exquisitely done. And I look at this great, theater, and I hear, well, I don't know, this may be too small, we may not have that. And then, I look at some of the other things, and then I come to the dog wash, and while I am a dog lover, once again, I would like to see something a little more for the children who live here than for our four-legged friends who live here. So just keep that in mind. And I would also hope that, I'll never forget, my ex-wife will forgive me for sharing this story. We once tried to do when we were newly married, we tried to do our living room out of this article we saw in Metropolitan Home. And what we ended up living with for the duration of our marriage looked nothing like what was in Metropolitan Home. So I just hope, and I know this is a tough thing for a planning board, because there has to be some faith in the developer, that these beautiful amenities end up actually being there and then looking like this.
I just want to say that there's a lot of what we do. A lot of these apartments all over New Jersey, and your amenity now is how you compete with other developers. So you can't skim. You are in direct competition with other developers, and they're providing amenity. And the bigger the projects, the more amenity. So a smaller project like this really has to overcompensate to be competitive in the market. So the market really holds him accountable, or he's going to have trouble renting his apartments.
Mr. Phillips, do you have a question?
Yes. You have in 21 DU building, that's a 21-room building, 21 building, you have this amenity center, correct?
Correct.
And you obviously don't have an amenity center in the other 325 DUs, is that correct?
That is correct.
So the only amenity center for the entire facility is over in, what you're calling it, Building C, in this amenity center 2800, and that's also where the outside patio is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So, with all, and I think the chairman just referenced it, but you had an awful lot of pictures of different things. It's only a 2,800 square foot amenity center, and I think you're trying to cram like 5,000 to 6,000 feet of stuff in there.
We do get quite a few, 2,800 square feet is not something to, shy away from. We can get a 1,200 square foot room, which is like your amenity lounge space is a very generous space.
Again, I'm not saying no, you're talking about having to have an amenity for 96 separate families.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Separate families.
and that's going to happen all at this one site area if they wish to engage in those facilities.
Correct. We find them to be very popular.
That would be a problem if it's that popular and you only have 2,800 square foot for it.
Usually you're not getting everybody there at the same time. And obviously we have all of these buildings are fully code compliant, they're fully sprinklered.
Nobody's suggesting.
The occupant load of those spaces will be they'll be posted. And you won't have overcrowding.
Again, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that you're trying to offer an amenity and you're going to have it in all of your advertisements and all the nice pictures that you show of this place, but only a relatively few number of people could ever engage in it at the same time because of this limited space, by what you just said.
Well, I think the amenity is appropriately sized for the amount of units that we have here.
Mr. Riker, is it also fair to say that this amenities that you're showing in the exhibit that Mr. Phillips is referring to is typical for the project you've designed for this applicant?
Very typical.
So let me just follow, let me just jump in real quick, Steve. So the amenities that we were shown, would those be typical of a 2,800 square foot amenity site?
If I were to place, I could not place all of those amenities in, but we don't know what amenity is going to be popular when we do our market study. Somebody may say, this guy, all your local guys don't have it, nobody has a movie theater. We should put a movie theater in. That'll give you an edge in the marketplace. Then we'll make sure we'll proceed and design the movie theater versus the pet wash. I don't see that happening at this stage because I know the pet washes are very, very popular. But it's something that really gets determined a little later when the client does a market study and really understands his competition. We really program.
Maybe this is an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Because you design these things. If you actually built a theater that resembled the one in the rendering, and a fitness center that resembled the one in the rendering, and the pet wash that resembled the one in the rendering. So would the exhibits here, would that fit in 2,800 square feet?
No, not all those exhibits would fit. Absolutely not. But I don't know that we're going to provide all those exhibits. We don't exactly know which exhibits we're going to provide, and that's why I said they'll later be determined and we'll provide them. I can tell you, fitness centers, they haven't gone away. We will definitely have a fitness center, very popular. Club and amenity lounge, that will definitely be there. The other ones, the pet wash, the movie theater room, those are ones that sort of you guide yourself to your market. I mean, we've done amenities such as a gourmet chef's kitchen, where, and that is obviously in communities that are much larger.
Yeah.
We'll then invite in a chef to do cooking lessons.
Don't throw sweeteners at me that we're not going to do. Let me explain to you where I'm coming from. This is an application that I'm really struggling with. I think has tremendous problems. So I'm going to... So I certainly want to see the best and the most useful amenities that are appropriately sized for the 96 families that are going to live here. Because there's a lot of other things I don't like about the application, so at least I want to have a level of certainty that the amenities that are going to be there are going to be sufficiently appointed and appropriately sized, and be able to have enough space to be used by the 96 families that are going to inhabit here. So I really don't need to hear about a gourmet chef when I'm never going to taste his food.
I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that I feel that the square footage that's provided is appropriately sized in all of the communities that I've designed. This one is
So
appropriately
another
sized.
100 family units, you've been limited to 2,800 square foot in the amenities.
Yeah, that's about right. So between 25 and 3,000. It varies depending upon, the developers change their minds and
Okay.
they want to provide certain things. They like a bigger room here. The room flexes between 25.
It sounds undersized to me, just off the top of my head, but you're the architect.
It's definitely appropriately sized.
Mr. Phillips, please, I didn't mean to interrupt, sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay, it's fine. The leasing room. The leasing room is going to be specifically for the people who might be talking about rentals, or if anybody's got a problem or a complaint, they go to the leasing room. Is that where the management office is going to be?
Correct. That's the management office. That's the leasing. There'll likely be a small office for someone there, and then an open pool where someone will, a reception, someone greet future tenants coming in. There's identified by signage outside of the center. And you'll go in, usually it's a well-appointed space, there's coffee, you can go in, meet with future leasing, and sit down in a small conference room and go over.
And it's manned by people who would meet them.
Correct.
And I don't think we have testimony yet from Mr. Himmelman's application. How many people are going to be working full-time on the site? 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, X days a week? Because obviously they're going to be taking up parking spaces we haven't even talked about.
My understanding is we're talking 1 to 2 employees.
1 to 2. And the management people that are going to be doing this repairs and maintenance, what is it, how do they convey their existence onto the site?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I'll simplify. How do the guys who are going, or women who are going to be fixing, maintaining stuff get there? They have to drive there and leave a car there. They're not part of the staff of this leasing room, right?
Yeah, they're not full-time all the time there. They come on an as-needed basis to satisfy work orders that are put in the day or two before they actually come to do the work. So they may be there for an hour, they could be there for several hours, but they're not parked there for an extended period of time.
So there is no on-site
So I thought in the original testimony that there was going to be maintenance on staff on site. And now we're hearing that you have to call in.
They got pulled into it.
Okay, that was, maybe I misunderstood.
No, that was my understanding as well, but I think we can look at
Joe,
the transcript.
I'm sorry, I don't think.
Guys, hold on one second. Our co-reporter cannot hear.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Well, if they're taking out garbage twice a day in each of those buildings, I don't see how they're gonna leave. I mean, it's physically impossible. And one other item I'm concerned about, now that you're presenting a little bit more green space, are you planning to still remove your snow off the site, or are you gonna pile it up in that green space area? Because a lot of things are changing. I get plans, packets every other day, and I'm a little frustrated, and I'm gonna, Mr. Chairman, if I'm out of line, please stop me. But I got 6 different sets of plans that my poor secretary over here is trying to get out to everybody. I don't know which page is what. You're telling me not to look at the February 15th plan, which you gave me a couple of days ago. You got to get some order for this, because you're all over the place. It's very frustrating to me as a board member, and it's very frustrating, I'm sure, to the people that are here in attendance. You're thrashing all over the place to see what you could hook. You got bait on the hook. What are you doing?
Well, I'm sorry to bother you, but my understanding is that there was a submittal, Mr. Crisolo, back in mid-February, which was prior to when we submitted a revised concept plan, which, as Mr. Scapinitz indicated, was at the end of February. So the plan that we're discussing tonight as Mr. Phillips indicated, supersedes the plan revisions that were based on the original site plan. So I'm not sure why there's confusion, and there were specific letters describing what the changes were with the revised site plan. So no intent to confuse anyone, but so the applicant is certainly not looking to do that. As far as the on-site maintenance, Mr. Benoit has indicated that the maintenance will be covered, either it will be on site or there's a possibility that it won't occur every day, but that it will also be done on an as-needed basis. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would also add, just to clarify, so there'll be 1 to 2 people full-time leasing staff, and the leasing program happens Monday through Friday, basically 9 to 5, and then some number of hours on Saturday and Sunday. Likely to be 3 to 4 hours each of those days. There'll likely be a full-time person that's handling cleanup and regular routine maintenance type items, including garbage removal during the day, and also on an as-needed basis, any other staff that we would send to the site to handle service work orders.
But that one person who's on site would have a workspace. They'll just be a wandering maintenance guy.
He's moving through the buildings and around the property all day long.
Okay.
With his garbage truck.
Excuse me?
With his garbage truck,
Yes.
right?
No, he doesn't have a garbage truck. He's just.
Well, where's he putting the garbage?
He has a
Putting it in-
knapsack on his back.
He's putting it on his back. That's hilarious. But if we want to get serious, he's got a rolling cart, and he rolls it out to the dumpsters and puts it in the dumpster.
Where's the dumpsters?
They're shown on the plan.
There's 2 of them. Mr. Sack?
Yeah.
I know that you guys are going to, I want to let Mr. Sack know.
2 things. I don't, we're getting bogged down on operations, which quite frankly is not the problem of this board. Obviously, if they don't have this site fully staffed and functioning, they're not going to have tenants. All right, so I'm going to leave operations to them. I'm not going to, we're going to deal with land use issues, which deal with engineering, which deal with traffic, which deal with architecture, which deal with planning. I'd still like to hear some planning testimony this evening if we can, Mr. Himmelman. Mr. Criscolo raised the point about snow removal. As part of your submission, and I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, I'd like to see some type of snow removal plan. Where is the snow going to be?
Mr. Sack, we did submit a snow removal
Okay.
plan, and I believe your staff.
All right, they have to review it still? All right, that's fine, as long as they can review it.
And where Mr. Sachs, the other point is, we're also going to revise that to reflect the new plan, because obviously several board members raised the question about where the snow will be piled during the snow removal process, and we believe we have an acceptable plan for that.
All right, fine, thank you.
Thank you.
I do share Mr. Taylor's concern about the amenity space. This is not the only town I've been involved with planning and development in. This is an exceptionally small amenity place. And you may say it may be equal to the other sites that you have done, but do you ever go past some of these places on Saturdays and Sunday on the weekend? These people have come, in passing, said, yeah, I would like to use that facility on Saturday and Sunday when I'm off. But guess what? It's overcrowded, the kids are there, I'd like to sit over there and read a book. It's too small. Just my opinion.
Mr. Raker, if I could just interject, approximately how many units have you designed with this applicant over the course of your relationship? And 1 and 2, to the amenities that were presented here consistent with those units that we developed by this applicant?
You're putting me on the spot here. I would say that with Nick's group, we've developed, just his group alone, have developed thousands of units, or planned thousands of units. I've developed many of these amenity spaces. And I'm not saying that this amenity space is equal in size to the other amenity spaces. It is equal in size relative to the number of apartments provided.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, there's
Mr.
another
Hamilton,
question.
like I said, I'd be thrilled if what I looked at is what we ended up with.
Well, I share your point, Mr. Chairman, but I think the point is, I think the applicant, Mr. Sachs, the applicant didn't meet the marketing requirements that are necessary to keep these tenants and keep them happy. So the last thing you want to do is have amenities presented that are not going to be competitive in the marketplace. I think that's the point, and I think at some point there has to be a level of trust, given the track record of this developer, not in East Brunswick, but
I was just gonna say-
that they've built throughout the state. And I think it's, at some level, the applicant is presenting plans, and you, as you said, you've been on this board for, I think it's more than 20 years. And you have seen applicants present things perhaps that weren't ultimately developed, and I appreciate that. And that's why we also have a professional staff, and we have our construction department as well. So I think this is a replication of what we intend to move forward with. And I think the applicant in its business, quite frankly, would be doing a disservice to its tenants if it didn't provide amenities which are going to make them happy and keep them there as tenants. And that's really the bottom line.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean, you finish up?
Yeah, just sure.
Okay. As you remember, Mr. Hellman, in the last meeting, I was puzzled as to how the parking was going to work with finally getting these pictures is very helpful, so thank you. The floor plans. It just brings to mind a different question then. You have, for example, in 21D, you have 10 potential garages to be rented. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I believe so.
Okay, and so you're assuming, or maybe you hope, that those 10 will be rented by the 10 of the tenants that are in that particular building. I would assume that would be the goal.
Correct.
What if you didn't have it and somebody from another building wanted one? Would you move them over to another building so that they could have an interior garage in another building? Is that a standard business practice?
I'll let Mr. Benoit answer.
Yeah, again, it's kind of a self policing type of an issue, that if somebody needs a garage, we try to find them a unit where there's a garage close by. If they happen to be in an apartment in a building where there are no garages and they really want a garage and there's one in an available building next door, we'll rent them that garage.
Okay, and then conversely, if you have a situation where for some reason you have nobody who wants them, they stay open?
Yes, they do. They remain vacant.
So you could have theoretically 96 apartments occupied, but you would not necessarily have all of the garages occupied, is that correct?
No, that's not correct. The garages in every case that we own apartments are in great demand.
I didn't say that wasn't the case. I just said, if you have a situation where you have garages that are not rented, then they remain unrented and they're empty.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, any other questions?
I'm sorry. I have some questions. We haven't really touched upon the traffic flow, also inside as well as outside.
Actually, Larry, we're gonna focus on the architecture.
I do, I have, well,
But let me
Actually, it was more for the
let me
engineer.
address your traffic question, because they have not, they've submitted a concept plan, which our professional staff, from an engineering standpoint, has not finished its review. So that'll happen prior to the next meeting. And that's why they're gonna submit revised plans, formal revised plans, I believe, probably by the end of this week, so that they can be reviewed on a timely basis. And you can ask any of those, well, first of all, our staff will certainly have some comments, and if you have any traffic comments at that time.
I just needed a little bit of latitude. I have a couple of things. Tell me where you can cut me off.
Okay. I don't want to cut you off at all, but I want you to focus on the architecture.
I'm definitely, I don't know, the traffic definitely is a concern. It's been a concern. One building less or more, I still think is a concern. But if you're coming down and you're coming in on the Chase side, are you prohibiting a truck from coming through and then into where the people are parking? Because how are we going to stop trucks from coming in?
Yeah, I don't think we can fairly ask this witness to
Or it could be anyone. I mean, I wanted to talk to the engineer, but there was a number of questions.
I think you're going to have to hold those questions till the next hearing, because our staff, and I'll say it again, Mr. Reese, our staff is still in the process of reviewing this configuration from a traffic standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, and I don't, so hold your question until the next meeting.
It's just interesting that we're meeting without this information.
Well, we're meeting because we're under a judicial mandate to take action by a date certain. So that's why we have this special meeting, and your questions for this particular witness should be based upon his testimony. Tonight, we're going to deal with, as Mr. Himmelman indicated at the beginning, we're going to deal with architecture, and we're going to deal hopefully with planning. And
Who's next?
that's all we're going to deal with tonight. Okay?
Yes,
I just want to state for the record.
just into the mic, please.
Mr. Schmidt, you got it.
I just want to state for the record, based on everything that was just said, that it was inappropriate for the meeting to be scheduled tonight for a couple of reasons. Number one, our engineering staff has not reviewed anything in connection with these plans. That's number one. And number two, the plans were not available to the board till yesterday. We have one day to look at a set of plans that weigh 10 pounds, roughly, okay?
I'll let you let Mr. Sachs respond.
Well, Mr. Schmidt, with all due respect, I disagree with you, all right? We have not heard any architectural testimony in connection with this application. We're hearing it tonight. Presumably, we're going to hear planning testimony. I have stated previously that our professional staff is still in the process of reviewing this concept plan. Formal plans will be submitted. There are time mandates under the municipal land use law which state that those plans have to be on file 10 days before the hearing. So presumably that's why this applicant will get those plans in by the end of this week, so that they will then meet the 10-day requirement. Right? Those plans are essential. The architectural plans are not going to change. The planning testimony is not going to change. It was necessary to have this meeting because, again, this is a judicially mandated requirement. Right? We were supposed to, let me finish, please. We were supposed to make a decision by the end of February on this application. You all recall that, right? Well, it's now March 12th, all right? Myself and Mr. Baker petitioned the court to extend that deadline till the end of March. And that's why we're having a meeting tonight, and that's why we're going to have a meeting on March 27th. All right, so does everyone understand what the process is? You may not agree with it, but that's the process. We are under a judicial mandate to make a decision by a certain date. And if I have an opportunity, and I discussed this with Mr. Taylor, if we have an opportunity to have a hearing so that we can hear architectural testimony and inform the public as to the architectural plans, and we have an opportunity to hear planning testimony, we're going to take advantage of it.
Mr. Chairman, also, if I could just, and Mr. Schmidt, I don't know why you only got the plans the other day, but I personally delivered the revised concept plan on February 25th to the planning office. I'm not sure why you didn't get the plans. But number two, I think one of the focus points of tonight, in addition to the testimony that Mr. Sachs alluded to, which is architect and planning, was we're trying to react to the board's comments and your professional staff about the initial layout and some of the concerns. Mr. Chairman, you made it very clear from the very beginning you had concerns about on-site circulation, you had issues about traffic impact, amenities, you mentioned about the relationship between the residential buildings and the commercial buildings, and you asked the applicant to go back and take a serious look at this particular site plan. And that's what we did. And we submitted that to your staff. As a matter of fact, we did so and met, as Mr. Skapanitz indicated, we met with CME, we've gone over this in detail, and we're not doing this in a vacuum. So, and we're trying to react. I know Mr. Phillips had questions, all the board members had questions about, the ability of trucks to be able to traverse through the site, all these issues, and we're trying to respond to all of that, and that's why we're here tonight, to go over that and to also get feedback from the board and your professionals so that we can continue to work and maybe improve the plan even better. And that's really the whole point. So I certainly apologize. I'm not sure why you didn't get the plans.
Well, no, it's nothing for you to
But
apologize.
I want you to understand that the applicant is trying to be sincere here. They're trying to work with the board and also your professionals in an effort to move this process forward.
Without commenting on how I feel specifically about the application in its original form or its revised form, I certainly will acknowledge that the applicant is making a serious effort to respond to some of the concerns. where we end up at the end of the day, or the end of March, we shall see. But I think the board should understand that both the staff, the applicant, and all the professionals involved are making a serious attempt to at least reflect some of the public comments and the board comments. And we're far from, taking a vote on this. We'll hear a lot of both some more testimony, and we'll get a lot more feedback from our professionals before we ask anyone to cast a vote on this application. So,
And I would also echo Mr. Chairman, sorry, but CME has been really great in getting comments back to our professionals as well. As I indicated, they've already provided some additional comments on traffic and stormwater. We're in almost daily communication with them, as Mr. Stafford has indicated in the meeting last week. So this is a fluid process, and unfortunately, when you revise plans, you need to have the supporting engineering to obviously move that application, that plan forward. And so I do want to say that I think CME is really trying to expedite as best it can under the time frames, and we're trying to respond to those comments. So.
all right. Mr. Eastgate.
It's not a question of being careful. I think just if you have, Mr. Reese, if it's an architectural question, then please have it.
It's more of a planning question.
Well, we haven't heard the plan.
Plan is coming up.
I'm hoping we'll get to that.
I just want to know what we're allowed to ask questions on.
Do you have a question about architecture? Because if you don't, then you'll reserve your right to ask a planning question when the planner has to.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm comfortable at this point.
Okay.
People want to buy the apartments. My question is more around this. Is that what I have to wait for? Like how close the buildings are to the edge of the woods?
You mean the back space that was increased from 4 feet to 20 feet?
Well, is that still enough? Is that a planning question?
Well, I don't think that's a planning question. I think one of the concerns, one of the comments at one of the earlier meetings is that it was about 4 or 5 feet from the rear of the building. Now it's 21 feet.
So we could, the police couldn't
Yeah,
get
the
behind.
police could get back there.
So I guess that would be an appropriate question. Is it wide enough now that emergency vehicles can get by?
Yeah.
And again, that area that Mr. Sachs is referring to was adjusted as a result of the board comments. I mean, the architect did discuss what the additional revisions were. I'm not sure he's necessarily qualified to answer whether it's sufficient for the reason.
No, I think that would be
for others.
I'm just looking at it in emergency. I don't think the fire truck can do that.
That's what I'm getting at.
And that's it's not necessary, because the fire department has weighed in on this and has not asked to have emergency access at the rear, but certainly a police car could get that.
And this piece right here?
Pardon me?
Right. That's enough space.
Well, again, I'm not going to have Mr. Sachs answer questions from the board.
Well, who
Chairman, if I may,
Mr. Himmel.
if you don't have any questions of the board, Mr. Ritter, I think we might want to take just a few.
We're going to, I thought it was just,
Yeah, we have our planner.
Great, we're good.
Let's get into the plan.
Yeah, we need to take a break.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll be back in 10 or 15. Well, the Giants have traded Odell Beckham Jr., and I'm a fan, so, anyway. Just, there was a question about this application, and that it's been revised, but it has not been fully reviewed. And when Mr. Sachs, who I've known since the 7th grade, and I talked about having a meeting, both Larry and I always err on the side of getting information out to the public. So while we knew that the applicant had gone back and considered a lot of our comments and gave us made a serious attempt to incorporate some of those comments, I'm not sure how much, that the people in the public were aware of that change. So that's why when Larry and I discussed it, we decided to have this meeting. So even though this is really a conceptual plan at this time, I can almost guarantee you that another building's not going back in the final plan. I wanted to share that with you, the people who have been so diligent, and I really commend you for being so concerned about your community that you keep coming week after week, because, there's a lot more productive way that you could spend your time. So as someone who loves this community and grew up here, I really do applaud each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules. So that's why we decided to hold this special meeting. I wanted to make sure that you folks who've been so dedicated to know the changes at the earliest possible time. So that's why we're here tonight, Mr. Sachs.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to reiterate, and again, I echo your comments. Tonight's meeting was really only to just have the applicant present an overview of what those changes are. Those changes have to be codified into a formal site plan, which they will do within the next few days. It will then be reviewed by our professional staff. They're in the process of reviewing some of the material already, but they will have to issue a revised report. And certainly, I know some board members had some questions dealing with engineering, and I would just request that they hold off on those questions until the next meeting, only because by then our staff will have fully vetted out that application, and certainly then your questions will be germane. And also to members of the public, we'll eventually get to a public portion. Again, we don't want to be here too late. Most of you have testified, I'm sure, at prior hearings, but I'm going to just reiterate what I've said at other meetings. Limit your comments or questions to really the testimony you've heard this evening, which would be architectural and presumably now planning, because I think the applicant's planner is going to testify. I would hold off on any engineering questions until the next meeting. I would hold off on any traffic questions until that time as well, because again, our staff has to review this formal submission. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hamlin?
Chairman, thank you very much again. As Mr. Sachs indicated, we have our professional planner, John McDonough, who will be obviously need to be sworn in and qualified, please.
Sure. Please raise your right hand and be sworn. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
State your name, spell your last name, and give us a bit of your CV, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is John McDonough. That's spelled M-C-D-O-N-O-U-G-H. I am the project planner. I'm a licensed professional planner here in the state of New Jersey. I am also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, which is a national certification basically that allows us to testify anywhere in the nation.
And have you testified here before?
Only in front of the zoning board. In fact, it's rare that I get to testify in front of planning boards. Most of my living comes on the zoning board side. But I have been to essentially all of your surrounding towns, and for better or worse, Mr. Chairman, I do this on a nightly basis, so I've gotten to see much of the state.
Mr. Chairman, I'm familiar with Mr. McDonough. He's appeared in a number of boards of surrounding towns. So.
Well, thank you. We're happy to qualify you as an expert and well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McDonough, would you give a brief overview of the site and going through the various variances and the justifications for those variances? And in addition, I believe you have put up on the screen an exhibit which I've now handed out to the board members, and Mr. Sachs, that exhibit would have to be marked 9, A9.
So for the record, we're going to call A9 planning exhibits, and it is actually going to be a 5-part exhibit, a series of 5 maps and photographs that basically give site context. You've heard a lot of details about the site condition at the hearings thus far. Planning lets us take a little bit of a step back and look at the surrounding land use context and how this plan will marry up with the surrounding neighborhood. And so we start with the first page on A1. It's just a very simple tax parcel map. We've outlined the subject property in yellow, block 243, lot 6.04, which is actually a very spacious site, as you can see, in comparison to the other tax parcels in the area. It's certainly located at a prominent intersection in the community at the junction of Summerhill Road and Old Stage Road. To the south, we can see that we're right on the border
of Spotswood Borough. And again, we're looking at a parcel that certainly has generous road frontage, 550 feet on the smaller axis and 750 feet on the second axis. Flipping to the next page, we're holding the same basic exhibit, except we've now pulled in a layer of aerial photograph. Shows the physical or established neighborhood pattern. The site by now we're all familiar with, showing the office building at the corner and the expanse of parking towards the back or towards the north, with the access points off of both frontage roadways. And then of course you can see working its way up on the left-hand side or the western side, and of course on the northern side, we have this very nice buffer, this 150-foot wide buffer, which is something that the applicant is working with. Preservation is a key component of the plan that's before the board. It was integral into the site design, into the zoning. The applicant has certainly respected it as being a steward of not only the woodland that's on the property, but of course its impact on the expansive woodland that you can see in this particular photograph to the north. We have a pretty clear-cut land use pattern. It is a fully developed land use pattern, except for the woodland to the north. So the woodland is a vestige of the original forest that was here. You can see most of the forest has been developed. In fact, in this particular photograph, 3/4 of the forest has been developed with homes and commercial uses and the like. So again, what's important, what is likable from this application right from the get-go is that it does respect and preserve the woodlands that are on the property. Third page of A9. We now introduce some colors here. This is based on a GIS database. In red, we see non-residential uses, including on the subject property. The gold color, the yellow color are residential uses. And then, of course, the green is the vegetated area. Importantly, obviously here, we're at the junction of red and yellow, which are residential and non-residential. Perfectly appropriate to pull in a blend of the two uses, which is exactly what the applicant is doing here with mixed use, a residential component and a non-residential component as well. Fourth page is the reason why we're here. We're in the blue area is shown as the TG, or the Town Center Zone District, specifically carved out for this site. And as you've heard throughout the testimony, at the heart of this whole application, at the heart of the zoning here, is inclusionary housing, which is of paramount public interest. This is one of the sites that have been identified in your community under your relatively new 2016 housing plan and fair share element, which includes this site or identifies this site as suitable for providing affordable housing towards the municipality's obligation. The obligation is not the developers. The obligation is on the town side, and we have a developer here before the board looking to provide a realistic opportunity for affordable housing and is ready, willing, and able to make that contribution to the municipality. Finally, on the last page, we look at the surrounding land use context, or the physical context. In the upper left-hand corner, frame number 1, it's a little dark on the slide, I apologize, is a view of the existing building from Summerhill Road. We have an established, developed office building. Frame number 2 pans to the right, showing the site access off of Summerhill Road. Frame number 3 in the lower left shows the site access from Old Stage Road. And then in frame number 4, you get a sense of the building that is built along the frontage of Old Stage Road. With that overall backdrop, again, we're looking at the TG zone, which allows for this particular use. It allows for planned unit residential development, and that's pursuant to section 228-118.3 in your land use code. So importantly, in terms of the higher tiers of zoning, right off the bat, from a zone compliance standpoint, we see that the mixed-use development is permitted in the zone. And in terms of the intensity of use controls, the height, the density, the coverage, the setbacks, all comply with the vision and the requirements of both the master plan and the zone plan that has been implemented here. The plan, as you've heard, has evolved, and I realize that there are more fine-tuning that the board has to consider, but I think there is a good planning basis for me to render my conclusions based on the evidence that has been put forth before the board to date. There are several deviations or variances, design exceptions that the applicant needs from this for this particular application. And just to take a quick step back to hit some of the important site statistics here. I know the board got hit with it this evening, but just to recap, 6 buildings in total, 4 residential buildings, 3 stories, 96 dwelling units. Importantly, the overall number of units has gone down. The affordable component remains the same, 24 units. So we've gone from a 20% set aside to a 25% set aside, which is well above what is customarily found in terms of the provision of affordable housing. The commercial buildings include 2 buildings, one at 13,196 square feet for the CVS and one for the Chase Bank, 3,470 square feet. You've heard about the access, 2 off of Summerhill, 1 off of Old Stage. You've heard how the parking has evolved to be compliant. There was a lot of talking about parking at the last hearing with the parking and traffic expert. There is now compliance both in terms of the ordinance standard and with regard to the RSIS requirement as well. So these things are all important as we go through our review of the application from a professional planning standpoint. The list of the relief that the applicant needs, there are 5 C variances as we stand here now. The first is a relatively obvious variance, and that relates to the fact that the distance between the building and the parking is set at 0 feet, whereas your ordinance requires a 10-foot separation. That 10-foot separation is maintained throughout the entire development, except for where there are driveways. So it's only common sense that there needs to be connectivity between the driveway and the garage space that will enclose it. So in that regard, we certainly see the relief as being reasonable and going towards the overall project betterment. Additionally, there is off-street parking for the retail component or for the CVS, where we're looking at a minimum count of 59 spaces, whereas 66 would be required. But again, the overall parking requirement on the development is going to be met here with 269 spaces being provided, whereas 246 spaces are required. Relief is being requested with respect to the buffer composition, and you heard this through our engineer's testimony at the very outset. 38 trees are being proposed in the buffer, whereas 60 would be required, or 1 tree for every 5 spaces. Inherent to this application is to provide for some screening, so there is an element of evergreens here, and hence the shortened number of trees. Just heard the testimony of the architect with respect to the number of units per building. In the interest of efficiency, in the interest of providing for affordable housing, there are buildings that are above the 20-unit maximum in the ordinance. 25 is the maximum proposed in the building, so relief is requested in that regard. And then finally, there is a requirement in the ordinance where the off-street parking be segmented, a maximum of 50 parking stalls, and the applicant is actually, again, proposing 269 as one integrated whole. But we'll come back to how that overall relief is warranted. The rest of the relief is all signage related to the CVS and to the Chase Bank. I'll show the board the elevations of those buildings to prove that that relief is, again, reasonable. The sign package is going to be tasteful and will provide for clear and safe identification of site. With all of that said, the legal basis for relief that the applicant is seeking here all falls under what we would call the flexible C balancing test, whereby we look at the benefits of the application as a whole and weigh them or balance them against the public detriments. On the positive side, again, looking at the application as a whole, Provision of affordable housing is of paramount public interest. It is a Supreme Court mandate. This carries significant weight for this application in consideration of all the relief that the applicant needs. This is an identified site under the Fair Share Plan and your housing element. The new development here will also add viability and vitality to an underutilized site at a prominent corner in your community. And the overall site is going to be improved from a visual standpoint, attractive building, a very lush landscape, and again, adding life to an underutilized property in the community. All of the above go towards our land use law, particularly Purpose A, the promotion of the general welfare, with new housing and new commercial uses that will promote the overall public good. Purpose I, the promotion of a desirable visual environment with an attractive development, both from a landscape architectural standpoint, from a layout standpoint, and again, from a landscape architectural standpoint. Additionally, we see the advancement of Purpose M, which is the planning goal for the efficient use of land. The applicant is working within the space that has already been disturbed, maintaining, importantly, that 150-foot buffer around the perimeter, provide a soft edge to this development to lessen the impact on the neighbors. It's a very generous buffer. It's a very effective buffer. It has worked very well with non-residential against residential. The applicant is actually now pulling residential against residential and maintaining that same buffer. Counterbalancing that with the negative impacts or the potentially adverse public impacts, based on the testimony before the board, again, we are dealing with relatively lower order variances here, not your traditional intensity of use variances, again, such as coverage, height, density, and the like. The overall parking supply, that relief was here last time, it's been eliminated. The off-street parking for the retail, as you've heard through the testimony of the witnesses before me, this is typical actual supply meeting the actual demand of a national brand with many types of facilities such as this throughout the United States. 59 spaces at a CVS is adequate and justifiable, notwithstanding the fact that it is short under the technical requirement of 66. The off-street parking lot, the maximum count per lot, again, the 50-stall segmented vision. I believe the applicant has met that standard here as well by providing for the interior landscaping and breaking up the property to create the effect of pods, notwithstanding the fact that the literal or analytical requirement of the ordinance is not met. I do believe that the overall spirit is substantially met here. Again, for the reasons that I stated, the off-street parking lot and the distance between the building and the garages is reasonable for safe transition between the two. And again, the buffer at 38 trees versus the 60 works effectively to provide a nice soft edge to the overall property, and effectively the buffer is maxed out as it's now proposed. With respect to the signage relief, and if I could ask our screen monitor to flip over to the CVS. One more slide, please. Okay, we'll go with the Chase Bank. Again, these are the facades, the exterior elevations of the Chase Bank. The applicant does need relief related to signage here, but I think it's safe to say that the overall sign package is very tasteful here. Certainly not overbearing, obtrusive, certainly fitting very well within the context of the architecture. Certainly going to promote brand familiarity, customer expectations, and strikes a good balance, I believe, between clear and safe identification and not being overly obtrusive. The relief for those signs are to have 2 signs versus 1. Again, we have one on the west elevation, we have another on the east elevation relating to the 2 vantage points that we have associated with the Chase Bank. Additionally, relief related to the fact that on the west side, the sign is not permitted, that we have a 6 square foot drive-through sign, which is essentially going to provide for a navigation aid, provide for wayfinding, and facilitate the flow through the drive-through. Can we go to the CVS now? So this is a view of the CVS, okay, that's a night view of the Chase CVS, again showing a nice integrated overall package, not overbearing in the context of the building, and blending very well. And I'm getting I don't have anything for the CVS. So the CVS package includes, similar to the Chase Bank, we've got actually 5 signs. Now bear in mind, CVS is a pharmacy. By law, whenever we have a pharmaceutical use, putting the word pharmacy on the building is a requirement. So that's one of the 5 signs. It includes the familiar CVS logo with the heart, again from 2 vantage points as well, similar to the Chase Bank. So we're looking for a total relief of 5 signs related to the 2 CVS pharmacy signs and the drive-through element, again in the interest of safe navigation through the site. The overall context, not overbearing and fitting within the architectural backdrop. And these plans have been provided to the board as part of the application packet. Likewise with the Chase Bank, the CVS sign is not permitted on the north and west side, so we're looking for a 17.7 square foot sign, drive-through sign on the north and west sides as well. That's it for the sign relief related to the building. The rest of the relief pertains to the freestanding signs. Again, we're dealing with multiple users here. We're dealing with a request for relief related to the sign height of 24 feet versus 22 feet above the road center line, or 10 feet in total. Freestanding area per side is 126.6 square feet versus 24 square feet. And the freestanding sign thickness is 20 inches versus 18 inches. The benefit of this, again, is clear and safe identification of the site. We're looking to consolidate the signage at the corner where it's easily visible from both locations, not overbearing, certainly on par with the signage that we see in the developments in the general area, particularly across the street. And then finally, looking for relief related to 3 directional signs, which relates to the curb cuts that are on the property. I know your planner in her report referenced 2 additional forms of relief that the applicant needs. One relates to the loading area screening. Again, the fact that the overall perimeter of the property is going to have a nice soft edge. The interior of the loading area is not necessarily screened in the literal intent of the ordinance, but the overall site, again, is going to have a very nice perimeter buffer, a nice soft edge to it, which will mitigate any impact associated with that loading area screening. And then finally, on page 8, there is a reference to the architectural standards in your planner's report, and the fact that the applicant is proposing a flat roof in a zone where pitched roofs or residential style roofs are preferred. To the extent that a variance is required here, again, that's a residential style roof being preferred. I don't know that it's necessarily mandated, but the flat roof is something that is typical for this building type, for a mid-rise or a multifamily apartment type building. Certainly appropriate to have a flat roof as opposed to a pitched roof. You just went through the architectural testimony. There is good balance, good proportion, good aesthetic with this overall building design. And in that regard, we believe the intent to provide for a building that does not look non-residential, but rather clearly reads as a residential building is met here. So once again, we take these bundle of relief, the 5 C variances, the sign variances, and the 2 deviations that I just mentioned as well. All again tie back to the flexible C balancing test under the law. This is the newer provision under the statute. The applicant does not have to show hardship. The applicant does not have to show practical difficulties here. It's a unique standard to New Jersey where we can show that the benefits of the application as a whole substantially outweigh the detriments. And on this particular application, on this particular site, We have very heavy weight in the paramount public interest of affordable housing. The overall relief, relatively minor and certainly not outweighing those overall benefits. I know there are things the board still wants to vet through the design engineer and through the other witnesses, but in terms of the global planning proofs here, I think the statutory criteria are easily met, and approval for all of this relief is warranted under the law.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. I don't have any further questions, Mr. Chairman, unless the board is professional.
Yeah, let me just ask staff about this applicant's testimony and his proofs for the granting of the flexible C. Do you think that he's reasonably made the case for granting them?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do believe some of the standards that were presented today for the planning testimony were being met, but I do have a couple of questions on some of them.
Please.
One has to do with the variance of flat roofs. I know your testimony did say that residential styles are preferred, but the same section does mention that flat roofs are not permitted. So I do consider it to be a variance rather than a minor deviation.
I will accept that language. I'm not going to counter that, but again, I think the proofs are there as to the justification for the flat roof given the building type.
Thank you. In the same vein, considering that the requirement was placed in the ordinance and that the current application does propose flat roofs, I believe, and maybe the architect can kind of confirm this, the parapet seems to be about 4 feet generally around the roof. Would it be more of a benefit to look at the possibility of maybe adding something that is beneficial for the community in case, for example, such as solar roofs, because you already do have a flat roof, and something like a solar roof might be a benefit for the community as a whole and would be looked at as more of a benefit outweighing the detriment of a flat roof, so to say. That's just a suggestion to something to think about for...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We can have our architect address that if you'd like.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to address that one, we don't have any solar roofs, solar panels provided on the roofs, but we do a white roof on our buildings so that we can reduce the heat island effect, which is somewhat of a green feature. So we do add some benefit in that respect.
Thank you very much.
All right. But it's... in terms of, I do understand you're providing white roof, but that's just something to consider if it's a possibility, because I don't know if there are some other HVAC systems that are being proposed on top of the roof for the parapet height to be that high.
There are some mechanical systems, and we do bring the parapet up and visible. You know, I could say that right now this applicant is providing a certain number of charging stations for cars. If that gets to be more and the burden on him becomes more, I'm sure he's going to look to provide some alternate energy. And he has to provide those cars with electricity, or at least provide his tenants with electricity. It's not a hard retrofit to provide solar panels on the roof when the need arises.
Okay, thank you. The other question I do have is, I think I did pose on my memo, was if you could touch upon the multiple uses on same lot. I think the ordinance does talk about, as a whole, as to how these would work together. Maybe that's something for the later testimony once we have a complete engineering plan. Please correct me if that's the aim the applicant is going for.
Well, the only thing I can say in that regard, and if we go to the planning report on the top of page 8, is that particular section is referenced. Section 228-221 says that when more than one building is proposed to be located on any lot, the board considering the application shall ensure that the existing and proposed uses will not overburden the lot nor be detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare. The short answer is we now have evidence from 4 witnesses, 3 experts and 1 operator as to the overall safety and efficiency of the operation on this site. So that gives credibility, I'll say, to the conclusion that I made, that the design as proposed will not overburden the lot nor be detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything further for this witness. Thank you.
Any staff questions, board questions for this witness? No? Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Himmelman?
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated before, so Mr. McDonough was our planner, as you know, and he's our last witness for this evening. Unless the board has any questions from any of our other witnesses, I leave the discretion to the board as to how you want to proceed at this point.
Any staff? I was going to open up to the public at this point. Okay. Any member of the public wishing to be heard, please raise your hand. Actually, if you intend to speak, raise your hand. Like it's kind of all at once. I just want to get some idea. Okay, great. Then, ma'am, since you're standing there, you can come right out. And again, please ask questions or make a statement about what we've heard tonight. You've testified at the last 2 meetings, I guess, right? So I remind you, you're still under oath. Or do you want them to? You want them to do their name?
Yeah, let's give their names again.
Okay. Oh, you did? Okay, you wrote that. Okay.
Okay, my name is Kristen, Kristyn, Grace, Corace, and I'm from Spotswood. So the planner mentioned the entrance to the lot from Old Stage Road, and just my question for the next meeting to have answered is, when you turn from Summerhill onto Old Stage, there is a sign that says, no truck over 4 tons permitted. And in one of the previous testimonies, that was one of the ways the truck delivering to CVS was going to go. So my question is, I looked up on the EPA website, an empty tractor trailer is 35,000 pounds, which is 17 tons. So any tractor trailer delivering would be over that 4-ton limit. So since that's a county road, I'm wondering if the applicant is going to be asking the county to change that. If not, then that tractor trailer is not allowed on Old Stage Road. So I'd like that answer for the next meeting, if that's okay.
Well, I think maybe the applicant might even be able to answer it. Yeah,
My understanding, and I could either have our engineer or the applicant testify on that, but my understanding is we would not be permitted to use those type of tractor trailers, and therefore that issue is eliminated.
So I guess, but the question is, you're not planning on going back to the county and asking to change the weight limit on that?
No, absolutely not.
So that's enough.
Okay, so we won't have a tractor trailer delivering to CVS on that road?
Using that road, correct?
Correct.
I mean,
Thank you.
You know.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Township Road. Yeah, actually, Mr. Chairman, let me,
Oh, that's right, Old Stage.
This is Township Road, and just to further indicate, Township of East Brunswick has never waived any of these weight limitations. We have weight limitations on a lot of our local roads, I think on Domes Corner Road, Church Lane, some of the various township roads, so.
Okay. Thank you. Please state your name.
Yes, Cheryl Bass, Spotswood.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. On the pictures that we saw tonight, there's a dotted line that is shown on Old Stage Road because one side is Spotswood Borough, it was labeled as such, and the other side is East Brunswick. Does that mean that half of the roadway is Spotswood, and if anything happens, a water main break, a traffic accident, that East Brunswick is not involved?
Well, why don't we let our, Mr. Sachs, who is would be most familiar with.
Yeah, the municipal boundary between Spotswood and East Brunswick is actually the median center section of Old Stage Road.
And that has nothing to do with this application, it's a.
So if there's an incident on the East Brunswick side of the road, East Brunswick will be involved. If there's an incident on Spotswood side, Spotswood will be involved. I will tell you that in the past, our police have interacted with each other. You know, sometimes it's tough to determine where the actual incident is, so.
According to the diagrams, the exits driving out of the development all go to the right. If somebody is looking to go across the street to ShopRite and they're exiting on Old Stage Road, they cannot make a left turn to get into the lane that would take them diagonally across the street to ShopRite.
They're coming out on Old Stage Road? That's correct. It would be a right turn only out.
Right.
Correct.
And even on Summerhill Road, it would be to the right. They would have to go basically across 3 lanes to make a left turn to get into ShopRite. Wouldn't it be much easier for these people to go to ShopRite, load up a shopping cart, cross the street with the shopping cart, go up the elevator with the shopping cart, and go into their apartment rather than get into their car and go to ShopRite?
I'm not sure the applicant can.
I don't know that the
can respond to
applicant,
that.
these answer that.
I also don't think ShopRite wants their shopping carts leaving
Yeah, right.
their property.
Exactly.
I have seen ShopRite
I'm sure you
shopping
have.
carts all over the neighborhood, a mile away.
I'm sure you have.
A mile away. It's not easy access just to get across the street. This is not good development of the entrance and exit to the property.
Thank you for your question. It was a good point. Thank you.
Do you have any pictures of actual parking of your other developments? Maybe Mr. Manoia can speak on that, because we only saw a diagram, but all the spots were empty in the diagram. You showed us the architectural, the site plan, and it has the lines that
Right,
show you
parking
what.
spaces are delineated on the plan.
Right.
Do
Are
you want to
those
speak to the size of the spaces? and
the size of it?
Was
Because
that your question?
basically, because there are so many 4x4s and big SUVs, they take up 2 parking spaces rather than 1. So if we could see an actual development of one of
Spots
the
were built-
properties.
well, I mean, you didn't just pick a size of the spot, Dave. So explain how you derived, the applicant derived the size of the spot. I believe they're 9 by 18. They're 9 by 18, which is a standard, parking spotted. And if you all are frustrated, I have a little Honda, I don't have a big SUV. So, but that's just the society we live in. If it becomes an issue for the people who live there, it'll become an issue for the people who live there about the deal.
Because I have seen so many people with big SUVs. You're going to have 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments. You spoke about children. They would buy a big SUV.
But the spaces are to the standards that's
Well,
required by
the
the law.
spaces are designed in accordance with the code and the ordinance of the town.
Are there still some pictures of actual properties that you have developed that would show how?
No, the answer is no.
Oh.
And ma'am, I'm going to have to, we have a 5-minute limitation, so
I
thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Good night.
Sir. Please
You
raise
guys
your
look
right
so
hand
much
to be
better than
sworn.
we do. What's
Please
that?
raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God? State your name, spell your last name, please.
My name is Ori Bensby, last name B-E-N, second word Z-V-I. You spelled it wrong, no, I'm just kidding, you spelled it right. I have a couple of very small questions. First of all, thank you, you guys running a beautiful process here.
The CVS doesn't have enough parking spots. And I understand the overall, there's kind of overflow into the rest of the parking spot. Can we get from CVS in writing acceptance from them for this arrangement that people can kind of park here and there between the general parking spot and CVS?
That's not within the purview of this board, that's,
I mean, I think the applicant has demonstrated that there's sufficient parking both for the
Would
residents.
it be okay to get from CVS if
Now,
you have a list from that?
I don't think CVS is going to provide that kind of letter that you're looking for. And the applicant's
So if
not-
they decide to enforce their parking spot, there's gonna be some kind of, is there a way for you guys to manage it?
Yes, we will be managing, of course.
I have another question. I used to live in a court here in East Brunswick. We had about 15 homes in a townhouse in the court, and we had 9 kids going to a school bus. With the 9 kids, it's about 60% of the homes produced kids to went to the school bus with some parents. It came up that we had almost 15 between adults and kids waiting for the school bus. With the 96 apartments, where do we gonna fit, is there a place to fit close to about 100 people waiting for a school bus there?
And let me respond to that. That's a determination that's made by the Board of Education. So, and the Board of Education certainly always puts a lot of thought into where's the safest place for children to congregate when they have to wait for the bus. But that's not within the purview of this board.
Is this not, the committee here not taking care into consideration the place where the school bus will have to load?
Absolutely, yeah. What they do is the Board of Ed will obviously, if this application is approved and if this development is constructed, the Board of Ed will determine where those children are going to congregate, where the bus is going to stop, where they're going to get picked up, where they're going to get dropped off. Now, I would imagine it's probably going, it could be in multiple locations in this site, depending on where the children live. But it could be one location, I don't know, but that's up to the purview of the Board of Ed.
I would appreciate if you guys would kind of consider where would you fit the kids and parents. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Please raise your right hand and be sworn. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please state your name.
My name is John Lung, L-U-N-G. I'm a retired chief engineer for 2400 Room Hotel in New York City. 2 comments. One for the architect. That leasing office is tremendous. I can fit my office and 5 maintenance engineers in there and my secretary. I think there should be enough room in there for an 8x8 room for a maintenance person to have a desk, to pick up his work orders, and finish it, plus all the check off lists when he walks around, all the buildings. And the second comment is that the leasing manager, I presume is going to have 2 titles. One, leasing, the other one is MOS, manager on site, to take care of all the problems with.
Yeah, I don't want to get.
I don't know that we need to get into the operation.
How the applicant runs his business, really, is it a purview that we can, that this board can consider, really?
Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Yes, sir. Please raise your right hand and be sworn. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God. State your name, spell your last name, and tell us where you're from.
Thomas Craig, C-R-E-G-G-B, from Central Avenue, East Brunswick. Just one quick question and one comment. The van accessible, the parking, the handicap parking, is any of it going to be van accessible?
Yeah, I believe the applicant testified to that at a prior meeting.
Well, actually,
I didn't see any difference in the size of the spaces up there.
yeah, they're going to have to, they've agreed to come back and reconfigure where their handicap spaces will be, but by law, they have to provide van accessible spaces.
There are some handicap van accessible spots in East Brunswick that are not van accessible.
And they have,
Yes.
those spaces may have actually predated the
Grandfather.
ADA, but certainly today, and every action this board takes.
And my second comment, like the gentleman just came up here, my daughter lives in an apartment complex in Cherry Hill, 18 stories, 2 buildings. Okay, the leasing office is 6 by 10, and it works out fine. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Please raise your right hand. Before you swear to tell the truth, self you got it.
Yes, I do.
State your name, spell your last name, and tell us where you live.
Janice Ligori, Liguori, 36 Francis Road. I want to zoom if you can, just Donna to put on the slide with the aerial view.
I don't even know how to work the remote at home.
Do we,
Can we get the AB?
There we go. Not that one, the one with the aerial view, right there. That wooded area that is the so-called buffer, that's the actual buffer right now. That is not going to maintain that whole property. It is being cut back somewhat, correct?
The applicant is maintaining a 150-foot
Right,
buffer.
but that's longer than one, that is more than 150.
They maybe cut back along the edge, but again,
Mr. McDonough, I believe she's referring to the few trees that are going to be removed, which you testified to.
Yes.
But that area.
The 150-foot buffer is being maintained,
Right.
but there will be some removal of impacted trees, minimal,
The
at
20,
the edge.
the new 20 feet that was provided, that's cutting into the trees, correct?
No, it's going
It is
in
that
towards the
way.
site.
Oh, that way.
In towards
Okay.
the site, yes.
All right, that's good.
Because at the last meeting, I believe Mr. Sachs and the chairman had asked the applicant to look to see if we could
Okay, so
move
it's
the
going
building.
towards.
Buildings are moving inward.
Okay.
Inward,
That's-
allowing for further buffer
So
behind
the
the building.
buffer is still maintained, okay.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
who wants to speak that hasn't spoken yet this evening? So there's one, two, okay. Please raise your right hand. You swore, you swear to tell the truth.
Get online too, if you can, folks.
Oh, yeah, I guess I was a little lax with the line here today. So
I do. I do.
And just state your name, spell your last name, and tell us where you live.
Melissa Lannon, Lannon, 5 Prince Road in East Brunswick. My question is really for the architect. And looking at the design of the building and the amenities, and your reference of millennials earlier, kind of more so on the younger age, it appears as though this is really being designed for a young professional. Clearly, we can control who's going to move there, if it's going to be families or children. But is that fair to say?
We hope to gain actually some empty nesters from East Brunswick. With the elevators that we're providing, we think they will, they'll help provide a nice place to, if they want to downsize in the summer, say in Florida, and then come back up, they can do that. We have elevators in the building, so it's conducive to both empty nesters.
And young professionals. Okay, so that being said, I guess my question is, forget about the number of units. How many bedrooms are there total in this unit, in this whole facility? And let me take a step back, I'm sorry. Really what I know is excluding CVS parking, excluding the bank parking, right? Because that has a specific reason. Excluding the 14 spaces that are specifically designated for Frost Woods, how many parking spaces are left that are specifically designated for the residential units?
I don't know that I can answer that question. That might be a question for
We
you.
can.
We think
So I guess that's my question. Yeah.
Let me answer your question.
156.
It's, Brett, do you have that number?
156.
Parking spaces?
156.
156 bedrooms.
150
Oh, bedrooms. Oh, I was.
I'm sorry, I guess I want to compare the both. How many bedrooms
Right.
and how many parking spaces specifically for the
Man, that's not
residential
how the
units?
state regulates.
That's not before we know that they're
No, I
allowed.
understand. I guess I'm just trying to, in my
Well, I
mind,
want to try to answer your
understand.
question.
So, Brett, you want to just confirm the number of parking spaces for the residential? There are 200 parking spaces
so that's excluding,
And then there's the one charging station, so it would be 185.
okay, so 185, that is excluding the CVS, excluding the parking for the bank, and excluding the 14 units. Now, can you tell me how many parking spaces there are if you exclude all of the garages? Because the reality is, I know that you want to try to control it, but you can't control what people are going to do with those garages. So if you exclude those, how many parking spaces are actually left?
Oh, David, hold,
I just-
Yeah, let me just respond, because there's something called the Residential Site Improvement Standards, which is a statewide code every municipality in New Jersey has to abide by. And what that tells you is how many parking spaces you need based upon the number of bedrooms you have. They are in compliance with that.
And I don't question that. In my mind, I'm just trying to understand, if we're talking about this facility primarily being for empty nesters, downsizing in one bedroom, and young professionals, well, that was my first question. A young professional residing in a two-bedroom, they're each going to be in one bedroom. So that's where I'm trying to understand.
Well, actually, the RSIS doesn't limit the number of occupants in a bedroom. All right, and it's
Just assuming there's
and it
one
probably,
person per bedroom.
Well, I'll give you my take on it. It probably needs to be updated, okay? It hasn't been updated in 20-plus years, or 25 years, but that's what the applicant has to comply with, and if they comply with it, then that's really a non-issue.
And my next quick question was, and it was more of a comment that was made by the board prior to going out to, for a break. Somebody had mentioned that there wasn't enough space behind the facilities if there was a fire and the fire truck needed to get back there. And I think somebody specifically stated that they didn't request it. Do they know that there's going to be fire pits?
Well, no, I don't think well, first of all, we're not sure if there's going to be a fire pit there, but I will tell you that the fire pit will obviously have to be approved by the fire marshal. Right, but in terms of, one of the concerns I know the board members had was, and that's why the applicant, I think, agreed to move that building out another 20 feet. Not so much for fire. It was really more for police and to make sure that if a police vehicle needs to get back there, it can. I don't think a fire truck could fit back there, but the fire district for this particular area has reviewed the plans, and they have not required any fire lanes or any fire access at the rear of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. If you swore, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes.
State your name, spell your last name, and tell us where you live.
Sure, Joe Boris, B-O-R-E-S, 9 Eric Lane, East Brunswick. My question is about the variances and the criteria for them. It's a cost versus benefit argument as the planner discussed. Was the testimony today the extent of, was that 100% of the testimony that will take place on the variances?
Yes, unless somebody has a specific question to the planner, to the board, or the professional.
And I guess is it the applicant's sole, is the benefit purely the delivery of the deliverable of the affordable housing units? As far as on the density equation? Because that was all, that was.
No, the planner, I'll let Mr. Gunn.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
That's an element that he indicated is a basis for the positive criteria, which is part of the justification for the variance. But I'll let Mr. Gunn elaborate.
And again, in short, it was not only affordable housing, that certainly adds tremendous weight. Aesthetics, efficiency, safety, redevelopment of a previously disturbed piece of property rather than taking down the forest somewhere else in the community to create affordable housing. So redevelopment is at the heart of our state redevelopment plan. Redevelopment is supposed to take place on sites that were previously developed.
As you said, it's not, the applicant's request is not tied to any particular hardship of the property, any of those types of things. So it's somewhat qualitative in nature what those benefits, how they're assessed by the board in terms of their value against. Is there any direct criteria that's used in that assessment? Or is it really sort of a balancing of those items in your 10 minutes of testimony that have to be assessed on a 7, 8, 9?
I can probably answer that.
Okay.
I've become a planner, because I've been doing this for too long, I guess. This is not a use variance, all right, so it's a little bit different standard of proof. If it was a use variance, it'd be in front of front of the zoning board. So these are bulk variances, we call them C variances. There were two provisions in the municipal land use law. One of them is a C1 variance where if you have a piece of property that because of exceptional topography, narrowness, shape, that would be a hardship variance. But the more common variance that this board sees, and even a zoning board would see, would be what we call a flexible C variance. And that's the testimony Mr. McDonough provided, and again, the board has to weigh that, is whether the benefits outweigh any detriments to the surrounding community. So that's really up to this board to determine.
Are those criteria measured in isolation, or do we have other sort of precedents that the board grants these variances with some?
Well, every application stands on its own.
Right,
So,
let's say I want to widen my driveway 2 feet, and it's within, one of those type of things, that's customary to the neighborhood, that's very typical. The board might say, well, that's a belief that we're comfortable giving. Does the board have any other ability to create a reference point?
well, this board routinely deals with variance applications, so.
Right, but they're all kind of, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, we obviously deal with variances in just about every application. Sometimes we don't even get planning testimony because, they're very de minimis variances. Obviously, these are not de minimis variances, they're variances that have to be proven, and it's up to this board to determine in weighing the testimony to grant that relief.
Right, just I guess the qualitative nature of it, there's such an apples and oranges.
It's
We have a lighting against
No,
housing, affordable housing criteria. It's not.
The issue there is it goes to the weight of the evidence.
Right.
In other words, the fact that this is a Mount Laurel inclusionary site,
Right.
Mr. McDonough indicated that issue is a component of the positive criteria, which this board must, Mr. Sachs is correct, which must weigh in determining whether the justification for the C2 has been met. But that goes to the weight of the evidence.
I understand. And then my original question was the 10 minutes of testimony that was given, the extent of the discussion, in my mind, just as an opinion, that seems very light in the context of the hours that we're spending in this context.
Well, I think
ask more questions.
Well, I think McDonough did a thorough job going through the variances that were sought or being sought at this application, the justification for those variances, as well as the board's professional planners also reviewed that and provided a memorandum in which we were responding to. I think it's been more than just a 10-minute exercise. I respectfully disagree with that assessment. But I know it's a statement, but I don't want the record to be reflecting of that.
Well, I would disagree in the sense that.
But let Mr. Sachs talk a little bit about, if we look at these specific variances and compare them with other variances that we've dealt with in other applications, and C variances which require different and higher standard of proof.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, many times you're dealing with dimensional variances. We really don't have a lot of dimensional variance with setbacks. That's not inherent in this application. So, I wouldn't characterize Mr. McDonough's testimony as being light.
Oh, I did not say that at all.
Yeah.
It's more the response to it was like, honestly.
You're talking about from the board? You're talking about the response from the board?
Yes.
Well, if the board has any questions, they certainly would have asked it.
He laid it out, articulated it very well. I thought he did it.
Well, and I also think the board is relying on a professional planner as well as Mr. Sachs, because quite frankly, the professional planner for the board is a professional, and they're relying on her expertise. I think the board generally tends to defer on Mr. Chairman. You may disagree with that.
So when I asked our professional if she thought that the applicant met the test for the level of severity of these variances, she said yes. She's our professional.
Right. We spent more time talking about parking radiuses that weren't even part of the discussion. So I think fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Do you swear to tell the truth, like you got?
I do.
State your name, spell your last name, please.
Mark Ibrahim, Ebrahim, 22 Lansdowne. My first question, are you allowing bids on those apartments? My name, last name?
No, sir, your first sentence.
repeat your question.
Okay, are you gonna allow beds in those apartments?
Sorry.
Beds, animals, dogs, cats?
Pets.
We are pet-friendly
Yes.
company, yes.
Okay, so, all right, that's good. Are you, do you plan to have a dog leash or some areas for dog walking over there in your development?
We don't allow,
A dog run or a dog park?
Yes.
We don't allow pets to be unleashed in our communities.
All right, so that's mean that's, you know, in East London, almost every family has a dog, so it's almost like an
Dog park.
Where?
Where?
Oh, you're gonna have a dog park?
No. There's an existing dog park.
All right, that's good. The second thing is like, where are the kids gonna play? Because like, when you bring in almost 96 family in there, I think like 150 kids at least need some areas to play
And I
every
think the
weekend.
applicant, I'm going to cut you off, but the applicant indicated, I think the chairman asked specifically, and Mr. Sachs also, we're going to provide some detail on that and have the professional staff.
All right, that's very good. Another question for the city, for our board, how many units how many units have been added to the city in the last few years? Because every month, almost a walker, see a new development coming up.
How many residential units?
Yes. Is there any roughly a number?
I'm gonna, well, the last year?
In the last few years.
Last few years, there's only been a few residential developments that have been approved. Maybe the two Hovnanian projects and.
Because right now, the reason I'm asking that question is I have 3 kids in elementary school and first school, and each classroom, almost 26 kids in each classroom, which is over number. It's a high density for a student in the same classroom. So where are those kids going to go after this? And I just want to know that if the city coordinator was Board of Education, or if they are capable to accommodate all coming kids for those new developments.
Well, let me just tell you that I know our school population has been much larger than it is now. I graduated high school in East Brunswick in 1974, and I had 710 kids in my graduating class. So the school population has been much larger than it is now.
Now, I'm talking about the standards for today is around 21 kids per classroom. And right now, in our schools, between 25 to 26 kids in each classroom. And that's a true number. That's about my kids and their classrooms.
Well, first of all, let me just explain. In terms of whether this board even can take that into consideration, we can't. There's a wealth of case law that says that your impact upon your schools is not a consideration for a planning board or a zoning board. But I will echo.
Just defending our schools.
Yeah, and I will echo what Mr. Taylor said, is that your question should have been to me, when was the peak development period in East Brunswick? And that would have been in the period from, say, mid-1970s, probably through 1990. That's when most of the housing was built in this town. It's been rather slow over the last decade, so we have not had a lot of residential development.
Yeah, and it's the same roadways, one lane in each direction, right?
Pardon?
I mean, the infrastructure of the streets is the same, one lane in each direction.
Well, unfortunately, the infrastructure always doesn't catch up to the development, but if that's what your question is. But in terms of the school population, I will agree that there was a time when actually they were thinking of closing. They actually did close Irwood School, probably back in the 1990s, and then it reopened. But again, it's not a consideration for this board.
All right, the other question is...
I'm going to give you one question because your 5 minutes is almost up.
This is kind of like a last one. Also about the development, there's so many developments going on right now in East Brunswick. And for the last 3 years, for my traffic time, I usually, like, every time I enter the town and get out of the town, go into my work. 3 years ago, it took me like 5 minutes to get out to Turnpike. Right now, it takes me around 15 to 20 minutes every day to go across. Is there any kind of analysis about the traffic overall impacting the city?
Mr. Sachs, I don't know why that question is even relevant.
Well,
Yeah,
it's not, but I'll respond to it. Most of the traffic that we have on Route 18, and most of the residents who are in this room obviously live in East Brunswick and Spotswood, we tend to avoid Route 18 if we can. So it's more of a regional problem with Route 18. Much of the traffic going northbound on Route 18 in the morning is emanating from Ocean County and Monmouth County and southern Middlesex County. It's not coming from East Brunswick. By the way, again, this is not a town that has had an increase in significant residential development over the last 10 years. It just hasn't happened. The population is pretty much stagnated. So it's all right, thank you.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God.
I do.
State your name, spell your last name, and tell us where you live.
Sure. My name is David Procaccini, Procaccini, 10 Jefferson Road, East Brunswick. I have a general question to the board, and I wanted to clarify. I heard somebody say before the finding, not anybody from the applicant, that there was a 50 parking spot rule that they need a variance to do more than that, or that's what's the minimum or the maximum right now. Just want to make sure I understood that.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
I think the gentleman's referring to the CVS for.
I thought it was an overall for the site, actually.
Now.
So there's, I can get the actual section for you, but the ordinance requires that the parking be segmented or broken into little pods. This is going to be one big parking lot with partitions, but it doesn't meet the literal requirement.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. So my comment generally for both parties, and we've heard testimony in both the zoning board and now multiple meetings here at the planning board, was that zoning was done by the town council, and they bought the property based on that information. Well, they bought the property knowing what the zoning is now, and why should we allow any variances? Because this is the way they wanted to jam this down our throats at the zoning board meeting. So the question that we've heard is the benefit to the community, and I would argue that there was many people here who stayed till 11 o'clock and 11:30 over the past couple of meetings. There's very little value to no value at all to the people who live around this proposed development. So I appreciate what you bought when you bought it, but the same way you're asking us to live up to what the town council did, I don't see any reason why any variance should be given to this application at all. That's my opinion. There's no value given to residents of Spotswood or East Brunswick that are on the southern end of town. So that's just my comment. I hope the board takes that into consideration. We moved into a community that's a bedroom community with single-family houses. If you look at the aerial view, and that's only part of the neighborhood that's next to this lot, you're taking the entire neighborhood between Summerhill Road and New Brunswick, and you're adding it into that one little area there, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I would have been fine if the town would have said any new development going forward, X% of that needs to be affordable housing, but I'm definitely against high-density housing in East Brunswick. That's not why I moved to East Brunswick. So just please take that into consideration when you make your decision.
I remind you, you're still under oath.
Please state your name.
Please state your name. So the
Jemana Diwan, Diwan, 38 Francis Road. I would like to highlight that for a project to be successful and integrated in the surroundings and marry the surrounding, it has to really be integrated in it. And we don't see this here. It's like it doesn't marry the surrounding, like you're stating. First of all, as you see in this picture, they're all small houses, individual houses with a slanted roof. And we're planting here 4 buildings higher than this with not even a slanted roof. At least if there was a slanted roof, you can see, okay, there's like little marriage here. I don't see a marriage here. It's a total divorce, I'm sorry. And then if we can go to the slide, the site plan. We don't know where it's at.
You have site plan?
The site plan.
You have a question, ma'am?
Yes, I have a question about the site plan. Okay.
Excuse me. Dave, looking control.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't know she was, I didn't know if she wanted to ask our planner, or?
I think you wanted to get the slide up and then ask.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Relating to the slide, thank you.
Okay. Yes, I want to ask, this is all on the same level, right?
Google.
The plan?
The answer is yes. It's generally on this, it's generally a flat piece of property, generally, very generally speaking.
Yes. Do you know that the intersection of Summerhill and Old State, there's a big amount of foot?
Yes, I think that comes out in one of the photos I showed the board. That drop off. Yes.
Okay. So do you have an idea how much?
Well, now I'll ask your question.
Okay, if you see the parking there, they put around the CVS, it's so close to the edge, and it looks like the car is gonna jump on Summerhill Road. It's above the road, it's just above the road.
The answer is that the grading from the parking areas to the road are going to be in accordance with engineering standards. There's no relief related to those parking stalls. If you're concerned that people who park in a
I'm
row
concerned about the lot, the first lot here, and if you see the corner of the where the car is, it's just above Summerhill Road or above the.
But there are engineering standards they have to meet regarding slopes, and they meet them, which means that.
Are you sure it means, because it's like just up, like as if you have a wall.
Scabbers, do you want to respond just generally?
Yes, there will be no significant grade drop. While it looks from the ground, I understand your view with what's there today, but under the proposal with the regrading of the lot, there will not be a significant drop off. There's no need for a wall in that location, so in that case, we're going to meet proper grading.
And these are things that are submitted by the applicant and then reviewed by our engineers. Again, you're looking at a lot that's going to be entirely integrated.
Okay, I just was concerned about this corner here. The third question about the garages. There's the driveway in front of the garage, right? So this driveway, did you count it as a parking spot or it's just empty spot?
It's counted as a spot.
As a parking spot? Okay, so if the people that are renting the garage, they could be from anywhere, right? Like, and not necessarily in the same building, they could be from the other building.
Yeah.
Not likely, but they could be.
They could be. So the driveway, somebody could park there that doesn't belong, like, it's not the same person that owns the garage that's parking in the driveway.
Would it be a problem for the tenant that has the garage?
Exactly.
And we would do something about it as the property manager?
So,
I mean, that's really that's an operational question. I mean, if someone's parking illegally, it's the car off the code. I mean, that's.
We're not professionals.
okay.
I mean, that's their business sense. They can't,
Thank you. But I'm still not, I'm still concerned about the roof and the total architectural look of it might be like a modern architecture or anything, but it doesn't integrate in the site. Thank you.
And these are the last two folks we're going to have to see.
Wilson Contreras, Brunswick.
You swear to tell the
Wilson Contreras, C-O-N-T-R-E-R-A-S.
And you swear to tell the truth?
Yes. Two questions and two comments. Number one, where are the fire hydrants on the property? The last time they were talking about it, I don't see any.
Fire hydrants?
Yeah.
There have to be fire hydrants.
Are they going to show where they're going to be located? Okay. Number two is the parking for the park. It's going to be from dawn to dusk. Can we include that on the weekends as well? Because I visit the park on weekends, because during the week I'm actually working. So I usually go on the weekend, so that will be beneficial for someone visiting the park.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think you asked, several board members asked about the hours of parking designated, that the applicant's willing to work with your staff on what they think is appropriate.
Okay. And now it goes back to the do not block intersections on Summerhill. That's going to increase about 40 feet of space. Pretty much it's going to take the traffic from this area and push it up north. So everything that's going to be accumulated on the traffic is going to be going up to Frost Avenue, which is getting some of the traffic. So I think the do not block intersection is going to only benefit the residents. It's not going to do any benefit for the traffic on Summerhill Road. So I just wanted to make a comment on that. And the last comment is, I moved to East Brunswick about 3.5 years ago, almost 4. I had to do some property changes, some changes for my property. And I went to the township and I applied for the permits and the laws. And as a good neighbor, I pretty much confirmed with what the laws were in the township because I want to be a good neighbor. And I think as the developer, he should consider that as well, not try to, like somebody else mentioned before, try to get variances to change the laws that our township has created and built, had for, X money.
Yeah, let me just respond to that, because we do have something in New Jersey called the municipal land use law. All right? We have provisions and statutes in that municipal land use law which permit any property owner, be it a large residential developer or someone such as yourself who owns a house and wants to put a pool in their backyard, and that pool may be violating the setback. And there are provisions that permit an applicant to go in front of the zoning board, if that's the case, or in front of the planning board. I mean, this is all consistent with, and again, this is the balancing test that we always have to struggle with, the rights of a property owner versus the rights of the public. And it's set forth in our Constitution. People can do with their property as they see fit, subject to zoning.
Correct.
Subject to zoning.
So if you want to increase, like put 20 units per building to like 25, that's also going to affect the density of the...
Well, they don't require a density variance because we do have ordinances
Correct.
in effect which indicate how much density, residential density you can have per acre. All right? They're not above that, so they're not even seeking a density variance. So their density is actually consistent with the zoning. If they were seeking a density variance, they'd be in front of the zoning board. This board would need to be considered.
I'm a little confused because I know the planner mentioned that right now it's a 20, the township has a 20-unit limit per building, and they want to change it to 25.
That's something different. We're talking about overall density on the site.
Okay, so that's a variance.
That's something entirely different.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, please raise your right hand to be sworn. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God.
I do.
State your name, spell your last name, and tell us who you are.
Eileen Cella, C-E-L-L-A. I live at 12 Janus Drive in Spotswood. The variances that I'm concerned about are the lighting variances. I'm very close to this corner. And I was just at a zoning board meeting in Spotswood for the Spotswood ShopRite, where they want to change some of the lighting. And Spotswood was very concerned about light pollution. They were concerned about the size of the signs, the placement of the signs, and because I am close to this, I am also concerned about the variances that they requested for size of signs, number of signs. I'm concerned about the lighting in the area, in the development itself. I moved to Spotswood almost 23 years ago, and I didn't move to Route 18 because I didn't like the lighting, didn't like the light pollution that comes from that, and I'm hoping that I'm not going to have to deal with the light pollution from this too.
Our zoning laws require that all light pollution go to Spotswood and not in Spotswood.
Well, I have the 7-Eleven there, so I can agree with you totally about that, yes. So that's my concern with the variances for lighting.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman, just to respond. I don't think they're seeking any variances for lighting. All right?
Well, the size of the signs and the number of the signs.
Well, the
that's
signage is something different.
Yeah.
But I think a topic for consideration at the next hearing, I don't think Chase is going to be a 24/7 operation.
But they're lit, even on East Brunswick, they're lit 24/7.
Well, let me just finish. I don't think Chase is going to be a 24/7 operation. I'm not sure about CVS, Mr. Emerson. Is that going to be 24/7?
I don't believe so.
All right, so if they're not going to be 24/7 operations, it's possible that the lighting can be turned off, tamped down significantly so that there's no glare. I know this board has done that in the past. We actually did it with the signs on the Tower Center.
BNC.
Okay, so.
Yeah, but I mean, that's my concern because a lot of times you go outside at night and you can't see the sky because of the light pollution. And I really don't want this to add to what I have to contend with in my neighborhood now.
Historically, this board has been concerned about that also.
Okay, good, thank you. Thank you.
on parking is also, but I didn't want to bring that up, just a second. Thank you.
Okay, any other member of the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, I declare the public portion closed. What further business do we have before us this evening?
No further business, Mr. Chairman. I know we may want to talk about the time for the next.
Yeah, these are late nights, and I would ask if my fellow board members might consider starting the next meeting at 7:30.
Sure.
So, does anyone have an issue with that?
You're okay with that?
From us?
All right, so.
Which meeting is showing is not tomorrow night's meeting?
No, no, I'm
No,
talking
no,
about
no,
for this application.
So
So,
the applicant, is that workable for the applicant?
Absolutely, and I want to just, well, Mr. Chairman, when you're done, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, let me just make an announcement. So the next hearing on this application will be on Wednesday, March 27th at 7:30 PM, not at 8 PM, and it will be again at this facility.
Memorial.
Oh, Memorial, I'm sorry, thank you. Memorial School, thank you. So it'll be at 7:30 at Memorial School, which is off of Innis Road in East Brunswick, off of Jensen Street and off of Riders Lane. All right, so Memorial School, 7:30 for this continued hearing.
Mr. Emmelman,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I was talking to Mr. Sachs during the break, and in an effort to make sure that we sort of have an understanding of the schedule of the next meeting, just to let you know, and the board and the public, we would be presenting our civil engineer, staff minutes again to go over the engineering issues. Our traffic engineer will then go through the traffic issues that have been vetted, that we presume at that point by your professionals as well. Clearly, we'll have all professionals here, but I wanted to get a sense, because we're trying to meet, as Mr. Sachs indicated, the consent order to complete the hearings by the end of this month. I know Mr. Barlow is here this evening, and he and I have had conversations, I believe, with Mr. Sachs about how he would like to move forward, either in presenting a case or cross-examining our witnesses. But I wanted to get a sense of the timing of all that. So in the event that we may need another meeting.
The meetings to be scheduled were for tonight and March 27th.
Right, but I think we extended the time through the end of the month.
We did extend the time.
So I'm just offering it as a.
Well, let's see where we are on March 27th.
Fine.
All right, if we need to go back to Judge McCluskey to ask for additional time,
Right.
we'll do that.
I'm sure the
Well, I
judge,
think the applicant has a concern about that, because, and so what I'm suggesting is that we would be willing to meet any day from the 27th.
Yeah, but we're not.
Okay, thanks.
and I would hope that the applicant, understanding this application and
Well, if I
seeing all
can,
the time this board's put on it, we need to go back to the judge.
I'm not going to, we're not going to deal with that issue.
no, but
But
Mr. Chairman, the one question I did have is for Mr. Barlow. If he could give us a sense now of his anticipated timing, so that we could all sort of be educated on that. That's what I'm trying to get a handle on.
you asking Mr. Barlow to say how long he needs it on March 27th meeting?
Or how he wants to proceed, whether he's going to proceed with his own experts.
We need to get you on the record, Mr. Wallace. Can you just kind of explain your connection with this application?
Good evening, Thomas Borlow from Lombardi & Lombardi. I represent the Deckers and also Ms. Maris. It's hard to tell you how long I need because I still don't even know what the application is. The finalized plans, as I understand, haven't even be addressed by your own profession. This plan is going to change again because there's going to go a playground. The handicap parking is going to change. The traffic expert haven't discussed the new counts, so I feel like I'm being asked to aim at a moving target. Right now I have questions for all of Mr. Himmelman's experts. Your board professionals may ask 90% of them, and then I may have very little to ask them. They may not, and I may have more. So I'm really hesitant to commit to anything until I know.
Well, certainly not.
Yeah. I think I can certainly get everything I have to get done in one meeting, if it was just a meeting to do that. If it's 10:30 at night and it's get it all done, I can't commit to that. So I hope the board understands my position.
So I I guess what I hear you saying is you're gonna need 2 to 3 hours to put on your case at the outside. And again,
I
it's
think
not
that's
fair.
fair. I think that's fair, sir.
Because you said one meeting if devoted, and
Yeah.
you would use 3 hours.
And it may be less than that, yeah, but I don't
Gotcha.
want to, I would say that's a fair,
Okay, and that's all we're looking for.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, let me tie a ribbon around this. All right? I'm not going to deprive Mr. Barlow of his right to vigorously present an objector's case. And I'm not going to limit his time period either.
Right.
I mean, if it turns out that, Mr. Himmelman, you can get through most of your testimony at the next hearing, and Mr. Barlow requires additional time, you know, this board will probably have to schedule another meeting, but it'll be after March 27th. And again, I'm not going to rush an application, and I'm not going to have this board make a hasty decision on an application. We've already sat here for, I think, this is our 4th hearing on this application. It's the 4th hearing. We've probably devoted 14 hours, at least, but more, 16 hours, you know, to.
That's just a meeting.
Right, at meetings. So, again, I understand, Mr. Himmelman, your concern, but I'm not going to deprive the objector of any
No, I
process
understand.
rights.
No, I-
And if, you know, if we need to contact Judge McCluskey and say,
Right.
listen, we need to schedule another meeting, we're going to schedule another meeting.
Now, I started to say that, and Larry cut me off. You know, he's an lawyer.
I appreciate that, Mr. Sachs, because you told me from the beginning, just wait to the end, so
Yep, sure.
I appreciate that. I think the one thing that can upend whatever the board decides to do is not just giving everyone a fair opportunity to be heard, to whatever degree.
Thank you very much.
And you know, I'm glad that, Mr. Himmelman, you said you'd get through your architect and planner tonight, and thank you for doing that, so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so then, anything else before we move to adjourn? We're out of town, guys. Thank you all. And fellow board members, see you tomorrow night.